This is a mega compilation of the most disturbing crimes that happen in cartoon show fandoms. You can play it in the background and fall asleep to, starting with crimes that happen in the SpongeBob SquarePants community. On August 16, 2019, the Fall River Police Department in Massachusetts responded to a call that came from the second floor of an apartment building on Peckham Street. The caller said just one thing, that someone was trying to hurt him. The officer arrived at the apartment and found the victim, who they later identified as Zachary Silva, with a laceration and a lump on top of his forehead. Now they tried to call emergency medical services, but Zachary actually declined. He started explaining what happened that night, saying that right before everything went down, someone knocked on his door. When he opened it, two Puerto Rican guys jumped him, hitting him in the head and stealing his diamond-faced gold pullover watch. However, at some point during the interaction with Zachary, the officers noticed that something was out of place in the house. They found pressure cookers, pill presses, a vacuum pump, a vacuum chamber, a container with white powder, and a container with gray powder, all of which are typically used to cook illicit substances. And Zachary in turn became aggressive after realizing what the officers had seen. Now the police then got a search warrant for the apartment and returned on Saturday, August 17th in a joint operation with the Massachusetts State Police Hazardous Materials Unit. And upon getting there, the police knocked on the door, received a response, but no one opened, so they forced their way in. They found all the same drug-making gear, a .25 pistol and 1.9 pounds of MDMA, a popular party drug. Zachary was then immediately arrested. Now during the police interview, however, Zachary's story changed. He mentioned that on the night he called for help, he was in the room with his longtime friend, 22-year-old Luisito Cruz Dubois. At the time, someone knocked on the door. He peeped through the keyhole and saw a person wearing a hood. As he opened the door slightly, Zachary was then grabbed from behind by Luisito, while the hooded figure kicked it open. He was then struck in the head with a pistol and stabbed with a hypodermic needle. He struggled and managed to pull off the hood, and saw that it was Luisito's brother, Terrell Cruz Dubois. It's not clear what happened afterwards, but once the interview was over, the police obtained a search warrant to search for the firearm and the clothes in Luisito's and Terrell's home at 603 State Street. And when they got there, they met and arrested Terrell, who was wearing Zachary's gold pullover watch. But Luisito wasn't home. Now Terrell was then charged with firearm and masked robbery, home invasion, assault and battery, and possession of ammunition. But as for Luisito, he was added to the list of most wanted fugitives. Then on August 27th, Detective Derek Beaulieu of the Major Crimes Division received a tip about his whereabouts, and acting on the information, they went to his home on Rosalita Street and found Luisito hiding under a bed. He was then placed under arrest, and at which point he was found in possession of 1.9 ounces of MDMA in the shape of characters from the SpongeBob SquarePants series, such as Patrick Star and Squidward tentacles. The shape of the pills made the officers worry about the safety of kids, who could mistake them for candy. With Halloween approaching and kids about to go trick-or-treating, they knew that these illegal drugs could accidentally or intentionally be distributed to kids by bad actors. So on August 28th, the Fall River Police Department issued a widespread warning against SpongeBob-looking MDMA drugs.
Police say they found this MDMA, also known as ecstasy, while arresting a suspect. As you can tell, the drugs are shaped like SpongeBob characters. Officers are asking parents and teachers to be on the lookout for these as school starts and to call police if they see anything suspicious.
Luisito was then charged with firearm and masked robbery, home invasion, assault and battery, possession of drugs, as well as possession with intent to distribute. However, it would seem like this wasn't the end of SpongeBob's involvement with narcotics, since 4 years later, a similar SpongeBob-inspired substance packaging turned up across the Atlantic. A few days before January 2023, police in Gavfort, Leeds had flagged a vehicle they suspected was connected to a local drug operation, though they didn't publicly disclose how they got this information. So on January 3rd, 2023, the officers stationed themselves by the A1 motorway near Garforth, West Yorkshire, one of Britain's major highway routes.
On January 23rd, 2023, police in Garforth, Leeds stopped a car which they suspected to be operated by a dealer of illegal substances.
As soon as the car pulled over, the search began, and it didn't take long for the officers to find stacks of cash hidden in a secret compartment in the back seat. But when they questioned the driver about it, who I'll be calling Matt, he couldn't explain where it came from, and because he had no legitimate story for the money, they arrested him on the spot, suspecting the cash came from dealing drugs. And with Matt now in custody, investigators took over and worked to uncover any addresses or properties connected to the local drug operation, and every lead pointed to the same house, a house located in Moorside Road, Dricklington, Leeds. The authorities moved swiftly to search the house, and once they arrived at the property, they met a man I'll call Flynn, who led them into the house and stood back as they searched the place. And in the course of the search, they found even more money stacked away. But there was one discovery that truly stood out. The officers found a large amount of cannabis wrapped in bundles bearing stickers of SpongeBob SquarePants characters. And so Flynn was then placed under arrest as well. and by the following day, on January 4th, 2023, the Yorkshire Post reported the bust to the public, detailing the unusual discovery. However, both Flynn and Matt were released while the public continued gathering evidence against them. The SpongeBob branding in Leeds was on the drugs. In the next case, however, it was on the suspect, and his neighbors paid the price for it. It was July 2022 on Jackson Avenue in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and residents of Waterside Apartments had just left their homes for work. What they didn't know was that someone had been watching their movements though, and by the time they got home, 5 of them found their front doors broken and their homes robbed. Many residents reported losing high-value items, including electronics such as televisions, iPads, and internet routers, as well as firearms, ammunition, and other valuables. They immediately reported the break-ins to the police, but while the investigation was still ongoing and officers were trying to determine who was behind the incidents, it happened again. Throughout August, 3 more burglaries occurred, all with the same pattern.
We kept getting reports of kind of the same MO where the door was kicked in and this stuff is taken is very similar, TVs, electronics, and stuff like that.
Now, due to these patterns, there was no doubt that these burglaries were all connected and done by the same person or group. However, what the burglar didn't know was that not everyone was away during the time these crimes were committed. Following the multiple incidents in August, at least 2 neighbors reported seeing the burglar run from the building immediately after the break-ins, describing him as wearing brightly colored SpongeBob SquarePants shorts with matching socks. Then on September 13th, 2022, the apartment complex faced yet another burglary, bringing the total to 5 in 2 months. At this point, the SpongeBob burglar had become a household name in the apartment complex, but the authorities would soon get a major breakthrough in the search for the burglar. The same day, the police arrested Eva Lewis, a woman who also lived in the Waterside apartment complex, for child endangerment and 1 count of concealing stolen property. Now, the stolen property was one of the items taken during the burglaries, raising the possibility that the burglar might also be a resident of the apartment. And so after these incidents, on September 14th, 2022, the Tulsa Police Department's burglary detectives decided to search through Facebook Marketplace for stolen items, specifically high-end TVs, iPads, and other items that matched the descriptions in the burglary reports. And they eventually discovered something interesting. An account was listing items that matched the serial numbers of stolen goods, and when they looked at the listing photos, something in the background caught their eye. A set of SpongeBob shorts and socks, matching what the victims and other eyewitnesses described seeing the suspect wear during those burglaries. And the account that listed the products was named Smackman, which turned out to be Edward Price's Facebook username. Their neighbor, Edward Price, had a serious criminal history, having previously been arrested in connection with burglaries. However, he would often get away with his crimes, as during his trials, the victims never appeared in court to identify Edward or even testify, so the prosecutor would simply have no case against them and the charges would eventually be dropped. But it wasn't just a Facebook account that implicated Edward, as one of the victims would also provide the video footage showing the aftermath of one of the break-ins, where Edward could be seen with an accomplice. So once the police received this footage, they released it to the public to help identify the other man. And while all of that was going on, they also obtained a search warrant for Edward's apartment at the Waterside complex. And 2 days after making the discovery on Facebook Marketplace, the Tulsa Police Department's detectives arrived at Edward's apartment and recovered items including multiple high-end televisions, cell phones, iPads, tablets, internet routers, firearms, live ammunition, and other electronic devices, all of which matched the valuables that residents of the Waterside apartments reported as stolen. However, there was one thing left to connect Edward to all the multiple burglaries beyond a reasonable doubt: the SpongeBob shorts and socks. As they searched the apartment, one of the officers heard the hum of a running dryer. They decided to check it out, and when they opened the dryer, they found the exact SpongeBob SquarePants shorts and socks that the victims described, and that had been seen in the Facebook Marketplace photos. And so Edward Price was then placed under arrest, taken into custody, and was then charged with 3 counts of second-degree burglary after a felony conviction, knowingly concealing stolen property and possession of firearms in the commission of a felony. And in the days that followed the arrest, most of the stolen items were successfully returned to the residents of their Waterside apartments. Then on September 20th, 2022, the TPD announced Edward's arrest on their Facebook page with the caption, "FYI, the subject's apartment was not located in a pineapple under the sea," referencing SpongeBob SquarePants' fictional home. The story immediately went viral on social media and several local and national news outlets, though until now there's no public record about Edward's or Eva's conviction. But while Edward was caught because of his cartoon printed outfit, the suspect in the next case actually has a real-life connection with SpongeBob. Roger Bumpass, the actor behind the Squidward Tentacles character in the show SpongeBob SquarePants, is regarded as one of the most established figures in the voice acting world, with hundreds of animation and television credits under his belt. His role as Squidward, a character he's played since 1999, was his most critically acclaimed. He has also voiced characters in popular shows like Tiny Toon Adventures, Batman the Animated Series, and Rugrats. However, his spotless reputation and impressive career were almost destroyed by a single incident. One evening on January 15, 2016, he decided to go for a drink in a bar in Burbank, California. It was supposed to be just another night out, but by around 11 PM, he realized that he'd had far more than enough for the night. So he got into his blue PT Cruiser and began driving home through a residential area of Burbank. Now soon after, the Burbank Police Department received a report of a vehicle that stopped in the middle of the roadway on the 400 block of South Fairview Street. The patrol officers in the area arrived on the scene between 10:45 and 10:55 to check it out, and upon their arrival, they found Roger's blue PT Cruiser right in the center of the street, with Roger outside his car, clearly drunk. Now when they reached him, he struggled to keep his balance and had to lean on his car for support. The officers then administered a field sobriety test, which Roger of course couldn't complete successfully. So he was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol and taken to the Burbank Police Department for booking later that night. Now upon getting to the station, the officers administered a breathalyzer test. In California, the legal limit is 0.08%, but Roger's blood alcohol concentration measured approximately 0.14%, nearly twice the limit. So the following day, he was formally booked into the Burbank City Jail on a misdemeanor DUI charge, and the bail was set at $15,000. Now on January 16, 2016, around 7:30 AM, Roger posted bond and was released from custody with a citation. However, he was due back in court the following month. Now nothing leaked for a few days, until January 19, 2016, when TMZ broke the story. Major news outlets including ABC7 and CBS then picked up the story within hours of TMZ's report, and Burbank police spokesman Sergeant Claudio Losaco confirmed the arrest to the media. Squidward Tentacles was a short-tempered, impatient, and bitter character who also despised his two neighbors, SpongeBob and Patrick. So media coverage actually particularly linked Squidward's usually irritated character to the actor's real-life DUI arrest. And as soon as the arrest photo of Roger circulated online, it was commonly paired with memes and jokes referencing Squidward's personality. Some said that he was tired of Bikini Bottom, while others joked about his frustration at his two neighbors pushing him to the brink. Now, public reaction on social media was mixed with disappointment and dark humor, with many users joking that Squidward had finally had enough. After all, Roger himself did say that the reason Squidward was fun to voice was because of his sarcasm and his frustration. However, Roger's account of what happened that night differed from the officer's claims. When interviewed later, Roger actually claimed that he wasn't leaning against his car and that the police found him because they were tailing him and not because they received a report. He also claimed that his car was not parked in the middle of the street. Instead, the cops pulled him over to ask him if he'd been drinking, which he then confirmed. Now, following the public reports, TMZ contacted Nickelodeon representatives to ask whether Roger would be fired for his DUI arrest due to the morality clause in his contract. Like most entertainment contracts, a morality clause allows a network to fire someone if their behavior becomes a liability or is deemed immoral or unethical. So with his career hanging in the balance, Roger released a public statement on January 21st to address the situation. To all my dear friends, perhaps you've heard now, I was arrested on DUI charges recently. This is the lowest point in my entire life. No words can describe the remorse, grief, and shame that I'm going through. I don't know what Nickelodeon will do, but I'm prepared for this to be the end of my career. The way God does things is to give us freedom to go down bad paths, but if we don't change, He gives us over to the consequences of our actions. I firmly believe that this is the case here. Please pray for me and the outcome of my actions. I need God more than ever. I am so ashamed. Thank you for your kind words for me. And finally, on January 25th, 2016, TMZ released a report on Nickelodeon's highly anticipated decision, confirming that the company had no plans to terminate Roger's contract and that he would continue voicing Squidward. It turned out that the network did not consider the arrest a violation of the morality clause, and since there was no evidence that there were any accidents, injuries, or property damage during the incident, Roger remained the voice of Squidward Tentacles. For Roger, the 2016 arrest ended up being not a big deal to his professional career, but in this next case, the victim lost pretty much everything. The DC streetball community had grown to become a high-level competitive area with an intense basketball culture. In this community, Andrew Washington built a solid life for himself. He was born and raised in the city where he lived with his hardworking single mother. As a teen, he was famous for his ultra-defensive and physical style of play.
He was just a physical guy. I mean, he could really score, really talented, really athletic, and you knew if he was out there, he's a trash talker, and you knew if he was out there, it's going to be a really long night.
From 2004 to 2006, Andrew competed for the University of Delaware, playing in many different tournaments both locally and overseas, and he continued to earn his place as a legend in the DC streetball ecosystem, a fast-paced version of basketball, typically played outdoors and with less formal structure and rules. He appeared in high-profile summer and playground leagues, including the Goodman League, one of DC's most prestigious summer basketball leagues. Now, he won the $10,000 Fight Ball 02, a one-on-one basketball competition qualifier tournament in New York City against 8 other competitors, and he would even go on to win a highly competitive final against Leandro de Lima, with the scoreline finishing 6-5. His win qualified him to play in the $100,000 Fightball 03 NYC Final Championship in March 2016. And from then on, Andrew built a reputation in the streetball community, especially in the Goodman League at Berry Farms, and was widely regarded as a living legend. Now in his early 20s, because of his distinctly recognizable pointy chin, Miles Rawls, the Goodman League's commissioner, gave him the nickname Needle Chin. However, that name didn't do justice to Andrew's appearance, so Miles started to call him SpongeBob instead, and from then on, the nickname stuck, becoming part of his identity and spreading far beyond DC. In 2021, he was even introduced as SpongeBob when he got a chance at being drafted into the Big Three, a 3-versus-3 basketball league. And by 2024, he was already a popular figure in the Washington DC streetball community. Now on Friday, February 9th, 2024, Andrew celebrated his 40th birthday with some of his friends, including his longtime friend, Estep Kyler Jr., a 36-year-old resident of Largo, Maryland. Now early in the morning, Andrew and Estep were sitting in a parked car in the 2400 block of Iverson Street in Temple Hills, when a verbal argument suddenly turned violent. Now while no one knew exactly what was said, the fight quickly escalated from words to a brutal physical struggle. And so at approximately 4:05 AM, Prince George's County Police received a call about a shooting on Iverson Street, and when the officers arrived at the scene and was searching the area, they found Estep outside of the 2300 block of Iverson Street. He was in pain, and upon close examination, he appeared to have been shot. And when officers asked what happened, he claimed that he'd only been in a fight with his friend in a parking lot. But when they checked the place, they found Andrew dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Estep was taken to the hospital to receive treatment for his wounds, and the police then began investigations. And those showed that Estep shot Andrew during the altercation, and the police believed that he then shot himself since his injuries were non-life-threatening. They also obtained footage of Estep with a swollen eye, knocking on a door and asking a man to help him and call the police.
Hello? Yeah. Can you please help me, man? What's up? You called 911, the police, please, man.
And in the footage, it is unclear whether he'd already shot himself. The police arrested Estep while he was still in the hospital, charging him with first-degree and second-degree murder. They planned to move him straight to the Department of Corrections as soon as the doctors cleared him. Now, Estep Kyler's case has not yet reached a conclusion, as there has been no public report of a court ruling. But while Andrew wore his SpongeBob tag proudly, the name had a more violent reaction in the next story. Robert Sidney Lee was 39 years old, from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, known among friends and acquaintances to have anger issues. Jamal Francis Britton, on the other hand, a 42-year-old from the same neighborhood, was one of those friends who knew about Robert's temperament. Now, Robert and Jamal moved in the same social circles around Lewisburg and Sealton, often meeting up at a friend's apartment to drink and hang out. Saturday, July 16, 2016 was no different. Jamal and Robert, along with their social group, were at Keisha Jacobs' apartment in Century Village in Buffalo Township. Keisha was the mother of Jamal's son, and the group socialized into the early morning hours of July 17. But as everybody got drunk, the atmosphere grew tense, and soon Jamal became annoying, according to the witnesses present, although the exact things he did were never mentioned. And when others could no longer take his behavior, he was asked to leave. In the ensuing argument, Robert insulted him, saying he looked like SpongeBob SquarePants. And that comparison hit a nerve, and Jamal snapped, repeatedly demanding why Robert had called him that. But Robert told him to leave him alone, and continued to insult him, and this made Jamal exit the house angrily. Around 5 AM, Robert was smoking at the rear of the apartment complex when Jamal returned, now wearing a black hooded sweatshirt. He asked to speak with Keisha, who thought everybody had left, and told him to meet him outside, so as not to wake the baby. But unknown to her, Robert was also there. When Robert saw Jamal approaching with his hands in his pocket, his alarms were immediately triggered. He thought Jamal was armed with a firearm and with hostile intent had come to shoot him. Robert asked if he wanted to fight. Jamal set down the bag he was carrying, put his hands up and smiled, and Robert in turn took this as a yes. They engaged in another argument, but this quickly escalated into a physical confrontation, and at that moment, Robert pulled out a pocket knife and drove it into Jamal's left side, cutting through a major blood vessel. With his life hanging by a thread, Jamal looked at Robert and said, "You stabbed me." And Robert's response simply was, "So what? What are you going to do? Call the police?" Now standing a few feet away was Keisha, who saw everything. She turned and went back to the apartment, where she would then call 911 to report the incident, before Robert then walked in a few minutes later and said to Keisha, "You'd better go check on your boy. I just knocked him out." Robert walked out right after saying that and drove away from Century Village, stopping at the Susquehanna River in Northumberland to discard the knife. And while all of this was going on though, Jamal, who was severely wounded, somehow got to his feet and walked away from the spot. but after reaching a nearby playground, he collapsed to the ground and stopped moving. Now the first responders would arrive just as Robert was driving away to find Jamal lying on the ground at the playground. One of the paramedics who noticed Robert's car leaving the crime scene took note of the license number, which she later provided to the police. Now Jamal was rushed to the Evangelical Community Hospital in Lewisburg, where the medical team, in an attempt to save his life, had to revive him twice. And after confirming that Jamal was stable enough for transport, they moved him to Geisinger Medical Center in Danville, where he was expected to receive more advanced treatment. However, at 8:28 a.m. on the same day, despite the effort of the medical team at Danville, Jamal succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at the Geisinger Medical Center. His cause of death was ruled as internal bleeding from the deep stab wound. Then, a few hours later, following Keisha's statement and the paramedics' provision of Robert's plate number, the police tracked Robert to his home in Point Township and placed him under arrest, charging him with a criminal homicide. Robert later confessed to the police in a video-recorded statement to killing Jamal in self-defense and throwing the knife into the river. He was then transported to the Union County Prison, where he was held without bail while awaiting trial. Now, in the investigation that followed, the police obtained security footage and witness testimony from Keisha, but couldn't actually recover the knife used to pierce Jamal. Now, District Attorney D. Peter Johnson was assigned the case, while Robert was assigned Public Defender Brian Ulmer to represent him. And after examining the facts of the case, the DA offered Robert a plea deal, asking him to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter and serve 5 to 20 years in prison. But Robert rejected this deal, choosing to go to trial instead. His argument was that he acted in self-defense, since he had interpreted Jamal's appearance as threatening to his life. But about a year later, Robert was found guilty of homicide and tampering with evidence, since he disposed of the knife. He was then sentenced to 18 years and 9 months in state prison for the homicide charge, in addition to a concurrent sentence of 9 months to 2 years for tampering with evidence. However, he was credited with having already served 1 year and 15 days while awaiting trial. Even today, Robert insists he acted in self-defense. However, the only thing the victim in our next story did was sit on the couch and watch cartoons. Armani Clark had just moved to Las Vegas from Reno, Nevada, after his mother, Justine Tate, accepted a new job there. Armani was highly athletic and dreamed of becoming a football star. At a young age, he was already his younger sibling's protector on the street, especially his younger brother. Armani and his family moved to an apartment at Town & Country Manor Apartments in southeast Las Vegas, but their lives would soon get entangled with that of a dangerous man named Eleazar Quintero. 41-year-old Eleazar was a career criminal who'd just been busted for over 500 fentanyl pills only weeks before Armani's family moved to Las Vegas. Because his record banned him from owning weapons, he was quickly arrested again for having a gun and scheduled for sentencing on March 8, 2023. Around this time, Eleazar was living next door to Armani's family, not as a legal tenant, but crashing in an apartment he was subletting from a friend we'll call Manny. On Tuesday, March 7, 2023, Eleazar was spending time with his friends in his apartment. At some point in the early evening, he got up and retrieved a rifle from his bedroom, shouldered it, and put it towards the south wall. What he didn't know was that on the other side of the south wall, Armani was sitting quietly on the couch with his younger brother, Honor, watching an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants on television. And right before 6 p.m., Eleazar delivered a famous line by Al Pacino's character, Tony Montana, from the 1983 film Scarface, saying, "Say hello to my little friend," and then fired indiscriminately at the south wall of his apartment. Now, Eleazar appeared to be in shock the moment the firearm went off. According to one of his friends, his reaction suggested that he may not have intended to fire it, but the weapon already went off, and it ripped through the apartment wall that separated Eleazar's unit from the Tate family's apartment, and it struck Armani in the head, then shattered, sending fragments into Honor's leg. In another room, Justine was catching up with other family members, and the moment they heard the sound of the gunshot, they immediately rushed out of the room and ran into the living room to check on the boys, and when they entered the room, they were greeted by chaos. Honor cried out softly and twisted his leg because it hurt so much, and when they turned towards Armani, there was only cold and silence.
My baby got shot in his head.
Meanwhile, in the other room, Eleazar's friends became agitated as they heard screaming from their neighbor's apartment. They immediately knew that the bullet had hit someone, and engulfed with fear, Eleazar began to pack the rifle into a long black cloth bag. Shortly afterward, one of Armani's parents saw what they described as a heavy-set Hispanic male going out of the neighbor's room. He apparently even asked if the discharged bullet had hit someone, and when they confirmed, he immediately bolted from the scene, taking multiple firearms with him as he escaped. Now, first responders later arrived at the scene, and both Armani and Honor were transported to Sunrise Hospital and Medical Center for emergency treatment. The medical personnel tried all they could to resuscitate Armani, but despite their efforts, the doctor pronounced him dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. On the other hand, Honor's injury was ruled as non-life-threatening, so he received treatment for his leg. Now, around 30 minutes after the shooting, Eleazar made a frantic call to Manny, saying, "Something went down. Something bad went down at the apartment." He then called another friend saying, "I'm in trouble, I need a place to hide." Now his friend agreed to come over, and not long afterward, Eliezer arrived at the apartment with multiple firearms. And when asked where all the guns came from, Eliezer told them that he tried to sell a firearm to someone inside his apartment and accidentally shot someone. And while Eliezer was still hiding, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officers began their investigation, obtaining surveillance footage from the apartment complex that captured a man matching Eliezer's description getting into a car, then driving away from the complex. They also went into Justine's apartment, found a bullet hole in the wall, and conducted a welfare check on Eliezer's apartment, and also found a single corresponding bullet hole on the opposite side. And while searching through the apartment, they found Eliezer's debit card, confirming that he was there. Now the following day, Eliezer failed to appear in court for scheduled sentencing, so the judge issued a warrant for his arrest, and soon after, the police managed to locate Eliezer and took him into custody for failing to appear in court. He received 2 to 5 years in prison for the previous drug and gun charges, and was taken to the Nevada Department of Corrections to serve his time, while the investigation for the shooting was still ongoing. Now during the investigation, a GoFundMe fundraiser was set on March 8, 2023 to help cover the funeral expenses and to support Honor. On the GoFundMe page, Justine wrote, "Never in a million years would I think I'd have to bury my beautiful son. He was great, and if you knew my son, then you knew a smile would brighten up the darkest house. My children didn't deserve any of this." The target was set at $50,000, and within a few days of the GoFundMe page going live, almost $20,000 had already been raised. Then on Friday, March 10, 2023, Justine spoke to Fox 5 Vegas about the tragedy. Visibly distressed, she described the horror of watching her son bleed out right in front of their TV, adding, "If I could have taken that bullet from them, I would have. I would rather them live without a mommy than to lose their life." And when asked about how Honor's coping with the situation and what he just experienced, she said,
It's so traumatized, he doesn't want to leave the house. But yesterday when I went to clean his wounds, he immediately was like, "Mama, I want our money."
On Tuesday, March 14, 2023, multiple news outlets began reporting on the case, with the story spreading nationally due to the tragic and unique circumstances of Armani getting shot while watching SpongeBob SquarePants with his brother. And with the story going national, Clark County Sheriff Kevin McMahill held a press conference to address the case, confirming that the police identified and arrested Eliezer Quintero due to his previous drug and gun charges. The sheriff added, "He's out there showing off with a gun, and then pulls the trigger on the gun, killing one of the victims and hospitalizing another. We had done a long-time narcotic investigation on him." He concluded that the investigation was ongoing to confirm what the man was doing with the rifle and to find evidence to formally charge him with murder rather than a lesser charge. And a few months later, on Wednesday, October 11, 2023, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department homicide detectives officially identified the 41-year-old as the shooting suspect. This meant that in addition to his current drug and gun conviction, he would now face an additional homicide charge. In July 2025, more than 2 years after the incident, Eliezer pleaded guilty to 3 felony counts: involuntary manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and other charges. And so after a lengthy trial, he was sentenced to 6 to 15 years in state prison, which is the maximum possible penalty for an involuntary manslaughter conviction. He would be eligible for parole after serving 6 years, and he was also ordered to serve the sentences consecutively, meaning they would begin only after he'd completed his current sentence for his prior charges. Eliezer was taken back to Southern Desert Correctional Center, where he was already serving time on prior convictions. Justine left the courthouse still weeping, while the mother in our last story blacked out at the worst possible moment of her life. At the house on Cedar Lake Road, Blake realized that he hadn't seen his big sister Justine or her daughter Sutton in hours. His older brother, Neasley, had just asked where they were, so Blake went back to the property to look for them, and in the shadows he spotted a blue plastic bin and some black trash bags, and as he got closer, his heart dropped. A human foot was sticking out of one of the bags. He panicked and ran back to find Neasley, but his brother didn't believe him at first. When Neasley finally followed him back and saw the terrifying scene for himself, the reality set in, and they immediately called 911. The year was 2012, and Justine had just been diagnosed with multiple mental health disorders, including bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, general anxiety, and depression. Over the next decade, managing those conditions would take over her life, and in her struggles, she turned to drugs, developing an addiction to heroin and methamphetamines, which only made her mental health worse. Now by 2017, Justine was a single mother to her daughter, Sutton Marie Mosser. Left to raise Sutton alone after her father's departure, Justine now faced the burden of managing her declining mental health while taking care of her child. Now before Sutton was born, Justine was on prescribed medication to manage her conditions, but in 2020 she decided to not take her medications anymore, and by September 2021 she'd gone 1 year without them. Now despite having her own apartment in Oscoda Township, Justine and Sutton spent most of her time at the Cedar Lake Road home to be near family, and there Justine's mother, Elisa, acted as the child's primary caregiver, constantly urging Justine to stay so that she and her 2 brothers could take care of her daughter. She actually agreed, and by September, Justine Justine and Sutton had been staying in the lake house for about a month and a half. However, Justine's heavy use of heroin and methamphetamines had started to tell on her. She experienced severe withdrawal symptoms and went approximately 2 weeks without sleeping, and that was when the hallucinations began. Justine's grip on reality fractured, and she would often get confused about where she was and where she wanted to be. For example, she once fell asleep in a nearby graveyard in Oscoda. Then, on September 16, 2021, 2 days after Sutton's birthday, Justine's brother, Blake, woke up to find Justine in the bathroom doing lines of substances. He looked around and couldn't find Sutton, so he asked Justine about her whereabouts, but she just snapped at him saying, "Mind your own business." He was used to her talking like that, so he left her alone. At around 2:30 p.m, Neasy left the house to go to work. Before he left, he saw Justine and Sutton, and they were both fine. A short while later, Blake saw Justine leave the house to meet a pink car that had stopped at a store across the street, and after spending a few minutes around the car, she returned home, but then left again. Now Blake went out to the beach, and a while later, Justine returned to the house in the evening. She was in the living room with Sutton, watching SpongeBob SquarePants. It was at this moment that Justine went into another one of her command hallucinations, where she heard voices in her head that instructed her to do something. According to Justine, SpongeBob spoke directly from the TV screen. His voice told her they were going to kill her. Then the cartoon character threatened her life. But there was one way to avoid the catastrophe. SpongeBob told her, "Kill your daughter or face your own death." And this was when the psychosis completely took over. Justine was afraid for her life and felt the only way to live was to carry out the instruction. So, driven by terror and drug-induced psychosis, she went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. She went back to the living room and attacked Sutton. And after carrying out the crime, Justine blacked out. And when she came back to her senses, she didn't remember what happened. All she saw was that she was standing with a knife over Sutton's lifeless body. And in a state of panic, she wrapped Sutton's body in bedding and then placed her inside a garbage bag. She also took off her blood-stained jeans and black sweatshirt and then threw them inside the trash bag. Afterwards, she placed the bag inside a blue plastic tote and moved it to the back of the Cedar Lake apartment, near a sliding door in the balcony area. She then left the house immediately. At around 10 p.m, Blake returned home and found the house empty. However, he had no reason to think Sutton was missing since it was late. In the early morning hours the following day, Justine went to her apartment in downtown Oscoda and attempted to leave this earth on her own. But even after doing stuff, she somehow managed to survive the attempt. So she had left and began to walk back to her mother's house. Now when Neasy returned from work around 3:30 a.m. on September 17, only Blake was at home. And after realizing neither of them had seen Sutton or Justine for hours, Blake went to the back of the house to look for them. And that was when he found the body. They called 911 immediately, and officers from Oscoda Township Police Department were dispatched to the residence. Officer Gerald Sobolewski arrived at the scene and asked the brothers to direct him to the place where they'd found the foot. And after seeing what they found, he called in emergency medical services to the scene. The officers opened the garage bags and found Sutton's body wrapped in bedding inside. The Michigan State Police Forensics team arrived on the scene, and together with the Oscoda Township Police Department began processing it. Shane Hill and his team from the State Police Crime Lab took over the scene to look for evidence, and inside the trash bags, they found a pair of blood-stained jeans and a black sweatshirt. They also managed to pull 13 different fingerprints off the bags, and every single one of them was a match for Justine. And while the crime scene was being processed, the police began searching for Justine as well. And during their search, they collected security footage showing Justine near her house in Oscoda earlier that morning. And so officers were dispatched to Justine's house, but they actually didn't meet her there. About 4.5 hours later, at approximately 8:30 a.m, the police located her walking along railroad tracks near Vaughn Trail in Oscoda Township. And when the officers approached her, she was covered in blood and looked completely detached mentally. Even when they told her about her daughter's demise, she didn't react. Now the police detained her and took her to the Oscoda Township Police Department station for questioning, and during the initial questioning, she refused to answer any questions. Well, later on, after the crime scene investigation was complete and sufficient evidence had been gathered, the police obtained an arrest warrant, and so she was formally arrested and charged with 1 count of felony murder and 1 count of first-degree abuse. Both sentences carried the potential for life imprisonment. Now Justine was booked into county jail at 4:08 p.m. the same day. The officers notified Michigan Child Protective Services, which opened its own investigation into the case. Now speaking to the media, Martin Gajewski, the owner of a laundromat across the street from Justine's apartment and the person who provided the security footage that placed Justine's movements around her apartment, expressed his shock at what happened. "I've been here a long time, and this is the first time I heard something like this since the 70s. She was a customer here. I knew who she was. It shocked me because she didn't seem to be that kind of person. It is unusual to have something like this in a town like this. This is a close-knit community." Now Justine's mother, Elisa, on the other hand, didn't believe her daughter committed the crime.
"I don't believe Justine could ever do something like that, because she would always teach Sutton that she is kind, she is beautiful, and she is loved. I will be there for Justine no matter what anybody calls me. That is my child. And nobody understands that.
But on Monday, September 20th, 2021, Justine appeared for her arraignment at the 81st District Court. Now, she pleaded not guilty to first-degree felony murder and first-degree abuse, and was scheduled to appear before a judge for a probable cause hearing to determine whether her case should go to trial. On October 1st, 2021, Ryan concluded an interview with Justine, where she informed a CPS investigator about experiencing hallucinations during her withdrawal. She informed him that while watching TV, the SpongeBob character instructed her to carry out the crime, or she would pay with her own life. She then told him that that was all she remembered, as she blacked out immediately afterwards. Now, Justine would later plead guilty to all the charges, and by the time the trial was over, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on the first-degree felony charge. And for the first-degree abuse charge, she was sentenced to a maximum of 50 years in prison, with the two charges both running at the same time. Now let's explore the most unsettling crimes that happen in the Gravity Falls community. Created by Alex Hirsch, Gravity Falls premiered on the Disney Channel on June 15, 2012. It followed twins Dipper and Mabel Pines as they spent a summer with their great uncle, or grunkle, Stan, in the fictional town of Gravity Falls. However, what they expected to be a boring summer in the middle of nowhere turned out to be full of dangerous paranormal events. From haunted convenience stores to an interdimensional demon triggering the apocalypse. This show really packed horror themes into a Disney Channel cartoon. Now, the series ended on February 15, 2016, but with the fan community remaining active even today, it was no surprise that when Alex released a lore book on July 23, 2024, titled The Book of Bill, it became a massive hit. The book was written as a fictional journal by the show's main villain, Bill Cipher, the interdimensional demon that I mentioned earlier. The Book of Bill was reported to have sold over 850,000 copies within its first year, and even earned a spot in the New York Times bestseller list between July 2024 to January of 2025. But with it being so in demand, it also attracted the attention of people outside of the Gravity Falls community. Religious groups all over social media began warning people against buying the Book of Bill, calling it a satanic Bible for younger people, due to its graphic images and mysterious messages. Here's the warning for parents and teenagers and preteens. This book is very much like the satanic Bible for It is called The Book of Bill. It is created by Disney, and I'm sure there's an animated movie or show to go with it. One more attempt to grab the young souls. Witchcraft has been a topic for years, where parents thought it was okay because the witches look good, but it isn't fun and games anymore. From Harry Potter to the Book of Bill, Satan is at work and things for our attention. This book has taken an oath very much like all demonic things like the Masons or not. The TV series Lucifer, which put a spin on Lucifer being misunderstood, and I knew some female pastors who loved the show. Cause in her words, Lucifer is hot. So what are we letting our young people see? And now witchcraft is in concerts everywhere, from Taylor Swift to other well-known artists. If you see this book in your home, get rid of it. A conservative podcast called Battle Plan also discussed the book in their October 11, 2024 episode, accusing it of teaching to summon a demon, given that its first few pages had the reader pretend to summon Bill into existence. Now, over 2 weeks later, on October 30th, Christian author Lindsay Miedenwald published an extensive article about both the Gravity Falls show and the Book of Bill in the Christian Research Institute website. In the article titled, "When Entertainment is a Portal to the Occult," she discussed how the show's occult themes and imagery might not be suitable for the usual Disney audience, saying, "Christian parents and grandparents should know that Gravity Falls isn't just another animated series. It normalizes the occult to the point where kids will be desensitized." She also pointed out Bill's version of morality, which the book describes as a very flexible concept, designed to cram your brain full of guilt and regrets. To Lindsay, this sounded like he was encouraging readers to just do whatever they want in life, rather than stick to man-made constructs of morality. Now, although she acknowledged that the book's target readers were older teens and young adults who grew up watching the cartoon 10 years ago, she warned how the new generation of fans might be too impressionable to be reading something closely resembling a satanic book. This book is supposed to be satire, I think, but it comes off as real and blasphemous. It seems like a slap in the face to Christianity. The accusations gained a wider audience on social media over a year later, when an ex-user posted a video of him finding the Book of Bill in Walmart on November 26, 2025.
So I'm walking through Walmart. This catches my eye. It literally has you do a ritual, bro.
He then began flipping the pages and was horrified by the images. And with 5-star reviews on Amazon saying things like, "Bill Cipher is now my master," and "Are you ready to sign a blood pact with Bill?" people were starting to think that the occult allegations might be true. In fact, Alex didn't even deny the rumors. In a post made on Twitter, he joked about it, saying, "This is crazy. I encourage everyone to buy a copy so they can burn it. Better make it 10 copies, just to be safe." Fans of Gravity Falls also found it funny how a book about a fiction character caused a lot of hate. In the audio version of Lindsay's article, which was posted on YouTube on February 28, 2025, one fan also pointed out that the creator of the show was religious. It's making fun of Satanist people for believing this stuff, and by calling it satanic, you've fallen for the joke. Although this claim isn't accurate, since Alex posted on X on March 22, 2015 that My sis and I are ethnically half Jewish on dad's side, but were raised religiously agnostic, celebrating both Christmas and Hanukkah. And while the book sparked online debates, Disney never addressed the satanic panic, and the book continued filling shelves across the globe. And though Disney was okay with the demonic looking elements of this book, the Gravity Falls creator himself exposed their attempts to hide other controversial storylines within the series. Before Gravity Falls, the only other animated series Disney produced that leaned into darker themes was Gargoyles, which aired in 1994 and ended in 1997. So it took 15 years for the animation giant to open its doors to another cartoon with horror creatures at its center. And apparently this decision came with a lot of restrictions. On November 26, 2014, the episode titled The Love God aired. The plot revolved around the twins meeting an entity who could make anyone fall in love. And just 8 days after the show aired, one of its storyboard artists, Sage Cartunio, posted her work on the episode on her Tumblr blog page. However, there was one difference between the plot she posted and what Disney ended up approving. In the scene that was actually aired, the Love God matched an elderly woman with a man at the diner, but in Sage's storyboard, the Love God matched her with another elderly woman, prompting fans to speculate that Disney removed the same gender relationship. Then on July 14, 2017, over a year after the series ended, Alex addressed the change during an interview with the entertainment site, The Mary Sue. He said, "When one of our storyboard artists presented the scene to me, she'd made one of the couple's two lovable old ladies. It was sweet and casual, and I knew instantly that it was going to turn into a huge fight with Disney. We probably had 6 or so conversations about it. It's one of the only times I had a face-to-face meeting with the censors. But despite my greatest efforts, it finally came down to change the scene or we'll cut it out of the episode ourselves." And this confirmed that Disney intentionally avoided the representation of LGBTQ in the show, despite having other programs and products that show support for the community. And when Disney posted their support of Pride Month on X on June 2nd, 2022, Alex responded by saying, "Disney privately, cut the gay scene. We might lose precious pennies from Russia and China. Disney publicly, Hong Kong, we put rainbow bumper sticker on Lightning McQueen today. Consume our products, teens." Now, while this public call-out against Disney was surprising, Alex wasn't done exposing the company that actually aired his show. Days later, on June 16, 2022, Alex posted a video on X, revealing his battles with Disney and its Standards and Practices Department, or S&P. The video showed emails from S&P back in September 2011, nearly a year before Gravity Falls even aired. They demanded Alex revise words and scenes that they deemed too offensive for their channel, while the Gravity Falls creator pointed out how unnecessary the changes would be. In one example, S&P demanded the removal of a line that had the word Lucifer, since they'd feared they'd get complaints about mentioning the devil, and Alex responded with,
"So what if we get a complaint? The current line, scrimshod from the tusks of Lucifer himself, is the kind of stuffy, non-political, old-timey purple prose like you'd see in Moby Dick. It's 100% less offensive to any religion than the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride hell scene in Disneyland."
He even suggested how to respond if they ever get complaints about the word, saying,
"Sir or madam, we respect your religion, but this fanciful public domain language is used in a spooky, Halloween-like context and in no way represents a commentary on any belief system whatsoever. Please eat this Mickey-shaped cookie and enjoy this cute, classic, family-friendly Disney cartoon."
Other notes also restricted Alex from depicting anything that resembled something religious, like the word Jeez, which S&P believed could be mistaken as an abbreviation for Jesus, and Holy Christmas, which they think would be offensive to other religions. Now, unsurprisingly, people on X flocked to the comment section to point out Disney's contradicting views. One noted how Disney had depicted the devil in many of their movies, and even had Cinderella's stepmother owning a cat named Lucifer. And apart from words connected to religion, Alex revealed that Disney also tried to remove scenes with 2 other characters who were also supposed to be in a relationship. In one note, S&P told Alex to remove a scene where Sheriff Blubbs placed his arm around Deputy Derlin.
"I think someone just sped by.
Probably just a dream.
With you, every day is a dream."
In response, Alex claimed that the officers were just buddy in an attempt to make the scene sound less controversial. But in the scene's finale, he was finally able to confirm that the two were in a relationship. The censorship of Blubbs and Derlin's relationship added fuel to the fans' anger at how Disney would rather show a demon threatening the lives of younger people than depict a same-gender relationship. And while Disney censored this and religious words, they had seemingly no problem with Gravity Falls being involved in a real-life secret society. From the very intro of Gravity Falls, the cartoon was full of symbols that raised some eyebrows from fans. Most prominent of them was the split-second image of a triangular creature with a single eye at the end of the opening theme. This creature would end up appearing in seemingly random places throughout the series, making viewers wonder if this Disney cartoon was somehow connected to the secret society known as the Illuminati. According to the international journalism site Modern Diplomacy, this group was believed to operate in various fields such as global politics, military affairs, finance, and mass media, and control the historical process of the entire world, with their ultimate goal being to establish a new world order. This new world order, as explained by a Middlebury Institute's research, was the theory that the powerful elites terrorists are secretly implementing a dystopian international governing structure that will grant them complete control over the global populace. And the triangle shape with an eye closely resembled the symbol known as the Eye of Providence, or the All-Seeing Eye, which is famously linked to the Illuminati. And this had many fans and theorists worried how a Disney cartoon was openly showing their connection to a well-known and feared cult. Now, the idea of a group plotting to control the world frightened believers of this conspiracy. So on July 1st, 2012, just barely a month after the series premiered, one blogger named Agati181 made a blog post warning their readers that in Disney's latest show, Gravity Falls, they show everyone which masters they truly serve. They really don't care who knows it either. If anyone had doubts about their connections to the Illuminati, I'm sure this show validates everything. And this post garnered hundreds of comments debating whether Disney and Gravity Falls were declaring their loyalty to the secret society or not. One commenter even insisted that Gravity Falls is the Illuminati. The whole plot, the characters, the messages, sugar-coated in rainbows. I wish I could save every soul whose eyes will burn watching this. Then, over a year after this post, on July 12, 2013, the episode Dreamscaperers aired and finally introduced the audience to the triangular creature, Bill's cipher. Now, this confirmed that the supposed Eye of Providence symbolism throughout the series were foreshadowing the appearance of this character, who became the show's main villain. However, there was one problem. The episode revolved around child sidekick Gideon summoning Bill in a ritual, and the scene of a child summoning and making a deal with a demon was already concerning for many, most especially parents of younger viewers. But the episode also showed this.
What are you? How do you know my name? Oh, I know lots of things.
Lots of things.
This made the connection to the all-seeing eye more convincing to some, since, as the name suggested, the eye watched everything that happened in the world and its history, at least according to popular Illuminati theories. Also, when he said that line, his face showed images of various events in history that were full of conspiracies, like the moon landing and the pyramids, which many believed were built by aliens. And so, the appearance of Bill made the Illuminati theories more widespread, as more people began posting about it. Now, Alex himself addressed the theories just a day after the episode aired, saying, "The rumors that I'm hiding occult symbols in the show are totally false. I'm not hiding them at all. They're in plain sight." Since then, Alex continued posting and poking fun at the Illuminati theories. Like when a user claiming to be part of the Illuminati thanked him for the show. Alex responded on October 9th, 2013 with, "Words are cheap. I want a seat at the table and some nice skull chalices, yo." And barely an hour later, he then added, "Well, I'm part of the Illuminati now." Though after joking around the topic, Alex finally talked more about his choice of Bill's design in his August 2014 Time magazine interview, saying, "It seems funny to me to take the most ominous, Illuminati-looking symbol and slap Mr. Peanut arms and legs onto him, and throw him into the mix. It's something that always struck me as hilarious." Although Alex confirmed that he deliberately chose the Illuminati symbolism as a joke, believers continue debating about it to this day. And while the Illuminati conspiracy was controversial, this next group had a known history of silencing their critics in the most disturbing way, and yet Alex decided to publicly challenge them. On August 4th, 2017, Alex posted this image on X, showing Grunkle Stan wearing a sea captain uniform with patches of an alien and the planet Saturn. His speech bubble said, "Alien ghost live in your bones. Tax break, please." Alex explained in his post that he always wanted to do an episode where Grunkle Stan started his own religion, called Stanentology. Legal department frowned on this. Now fans were excited to learn about this lost plotline, with many of them even claiming to want to join Stan's religion, although others had a good idea why Disney rejected this idea, with one fan even noting that, "Considering the history of lawsuits or attempted murder of Scientology, I kinda get where Disney was coming from here." Now, the Church of Scientology is a religion established in 1953, where followers believe that humans are immortal spirits trapped in physical bodies. Now, this belief likely was what Alex was referencing in his post. The name of the fake religion, Stanentology, also sounded like a parody of the word Scientology, and fans who'd been following Alex's social media knew exactly what the Gravity Falls creator felt about this particular group. Back on January 25th, 2013, mere months after Gravity Falls began, Alex posted on his X that he bought the book titled Going Clear, Scientology, Hollywood, and the Prison of Belief. The book was about the inner workings and conspiracies about Scientology, while Alex used the bookmark with a photo of actor Tom Cruise, who's a known member of the religious group. Then on January 28, 2015, he began his direct criticism of the group, saying, "Turns out Scientology only has 50,000 members. That means my Twitter account has more followers than Scientology." Now this post was followed by a rude remark towards David Miscavige, the current leader of Scientology. But Alex wasn't done ridiculing this group. Just over a week later, on February 9th, he explicitly declared that, "Whether liberal or conservative, black or white, gay or straight, we can all agree on one thing. Scientology is nonsense." He then continued posting blatant criticism, even calling them a cult. Now, Alex also directly ridiculed Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard, saying on July 28, 2019, that he was an abusive science fiction writer who waged war against the IRS, let his wife take the fall for his crimes, fled to international waters, and died a reclusive fugitive rambling about aliens. Now, Alex's statements, however, weren't just trolling, they were dangerous, giving this religious group's history of how they handled criticism. In 1955, L. Ron wrote The Scientologist, a manual on the dissemination of material, which served as a guide for spreading the church's ideology. In a famous quote from that document, L. Ron wrote, "The purpose of the suit is to harass and discourage, rather than win. The law can be used very easily to harass, and enough harassment on somebody who is simply on the thin edge anyway, well, knowing that he's not authorized would generally be sufficient to cause professional decease. If possible, of course, ruin him utterly." Now, this implied that L. Ron believed that legal lawsuits were weapons to destroy someone's life and career, whether or not they win those lawsuits. And throughout Scientology's existence, they seem to be doing this and other forms of harassment against their critics. One case, for example, was Paulette Cooper, a journalist who wrote The Scandal of Scientology in 1971. Now, after the publication of her book, she became a target of the group's Special Affairs Department, who were known as Guardian's Office, or GO at the time. Within the same year of the book's publishing, Paulette was sued for libel by the GO, and even reported to have dozens of strangers stalking her. She also received threatening calls and found her phone lines tampered with, hinting that someone was eavesdropping on her calls. Now, in her interview with ABC News Network in July 2015, Paulette also revealed more harassment from the group, saying, "It was 300 people. They sent a letter saying I was an intimate worker with venereal disease and had attacked my daughter. They sent anonymous letters to my parents, saying I was practicing perversions with their clergymen." And when the harassment led to her depression, Paulette claimed that the church robbed a psychiatrist and got my records and sent that to everybody that I knew. Now, worst of all, the church had attempted to get her imprisoned for bomb threats, with Paulette recounting, "They got my fingerprints on a piece of paper, and then they sent bomb threats to themselves, and they had me arrested for a terrorist crime." Now, fortunately, after 2 years of legal trouble, Paulette's charges were dropped, but the harassment did cause her mental health to drop, and even pushed her to consider her life needed to end. Now, fortunately for her, in 1976, the FBI began investigating the GO after Scientology members were caught attempting to break into a Washington courthouse to steal records about their members. The investigation led to the discovery of their plans against Paulette, which included plans to frame her in more bomb threats, including one they intended for then President Gerald Ford. Now, with this evidence, Paulette sued the Church of Scientology for their years-long harassment, and eventually they had to agree to a sizable settlement with her to make the case go away. Now, despite getting caught attempting an extreme harassment campaign in the 1970s, the Church of Scientology wasn't done with this tactic against people who questioned them. Now, as it turned out, the group had already taken notice of Alex and his posts. On July 28, 2019, Alex posted on X that he'd get a fat cat and name him L. Ron Hubbard. You can't stop me, Scientology. And mere hours later, the official X account of Scientology replied with, "Hello Alex, thanks for messaging us. I see you're feline catty today. For those unaware, L. Ron Hubbard is the most published author of all time, and the founder of Dianetics and the Scientology religion." Now, Alex promptly replied with, "He is your crazy founder talking about alien ghosts. You can learn more about him literally anywhere in the world. That isn't your own propaganda." Now, the despite over the Scientology founder actually went on for hours, with Alex constantly replying with accusations against L. Ron and his church. He even mentioned the concerns about Shelley, since even by this point she hadn't been seen in public. And with the interaction getting a lot of attention, Alex ultimately posted a sarcastic warning. "Scientology responded to one of my tweets. If any of you find me face down in the LA River with a golden S stuck in my bag, you know who did it." And even though Alex sounded like he was making jokes about this, the Church of Scientology's history of handling public figures criticizing them made fans hope that they won't retaliate against the Gravity Falls creator. It was February 15, 2016, when the show's final episode aired, becoming a bittersweet moment for its fans. Now, before the finale actually aired, Alex had announced that their season 2 was the definitive end to Gravity Falls, and he had no plans to continue the story. So when the credits started rolling, no one expected a new mystery hidden at the end. But for just a split second after the credits, a grainy video of a Bill Cipher statue in a real-life forest was shown. Now, during its runtime, fans loved solving the mysteries within the Gravity Falls universe, as the cartoon was full of puzzles and hidden lore. Even the theme song from the very first episode contained a puzzle that hinted where the show was heading.
The page is covered in mathematical codes and alchemical symbols, including a cipher that translates to "Stan is not what he seems,"
and a whisper at the end. The whisper, when reversed, told fans which was the instruction code to decode the messages at the end of each episode. So upon seeing this video, they were left wondering what it meant. And on July 21st, months after the series finale, Alex posted the final clue to the global hunt for the real-life statue that would be known as the Cipher Hunt. This hunt was a unique experience for fans to actively solve the puzzles together and search for the next clue in real-life places across the world. And the hunt was a success, as it encouraged thousands of fans worldwide to help each other in solving puzzles online and in person. However, the hunt ended with someone calling the police. On August 2nd, 2016, just under 2 weeks after the hunt began, the statue was located by ex-user Momo in a wooden area in Reedsport, Oregon.
I can't believe I found it! Oh my god, I'm freaking out. I don't want to. Oh, he's all broken and stuff. Aw, his hat's broken.
Excited fans quickly flooded her post, asking where it was so they could actually visit it. And on that night, more fans near the area arrived and discovered a treasure chest buried under the statue. What they didn't know was that they were already committing a crime. When Linda Parker, the owner of the land where the statue was located, arrived at the scene, she was shocked to find groups of people trespassing on her property and digging around. And afraid of who they were and what they were doing, she called the police. Now on the next day, on August 3rd, more Gravity Falls fans began arriving, only to witness local police digging out the statue and carrying it away. This left fans confused and scrambling to take pictures, videos and even souvenirs out of the treasure chest before they were all taken to the police station. Now the same day, the Reedsport Police Department called Alex and his friend, Fawn Davis, who created the statue. They were questioned for placing the Bill statue on private property, but Fawn argued that he had connections with the real estate company Schofield Development LLC, which gave them permission to place the statue there. However, after rechecking the property lines, the Bill statue was apparently placed 117 feet away from the spot they'd initially planned to set it up, and those 170 feet had the statue cross beyond the property line, owned by Schofield Development, and end up in Linda's land. Now what's worse was that there were bear droppings and empty shotgun shells in the area where the statue was located. So the cipher hunt could have sent fans into an area where bears and possibly armed hunters roamed.
I was convinced we were gonna get attacked by bears because it was like so dark and it was just so scary.
Fortunately, no one was harmed, and after explaining everything to Linda, she understood and didn't press any charges. In the 2024 Cipher Hunt documentary uploaded on YouTube, she shared a statement saying, "I never gave permission for this to take place, and at the time was fairly upset about the possibility of lots of people wandering around my property and the liability that went with it. Please don't make me out to be a bad person. I just didn't have any idea what was going on at the time." Now while this matter was settled, the crimes surrounding the Bill statue weren't over yet. Alex had the statue moved from the police station to the Bicentennial Park in Reedsport, Oregon on August 5, 2016. Then, 10 days later on August 15th, Alex discovered that Bill's hat was missing, so he sent out a call for help on X. "Anyone know who the fan was who took Bill's hat? Bill wants it back." He added that according to the Reedsport Police Department, a fan had claimed the hat was theirs and took it. Now this post caused an uproar among the community. Most fans called out the person who stole the iconic statue's hat, while also criticizing the police for just giving it away. Then, just hours later, Alex posted a job ad on X, searching for someone to help him move the statue to an undisclosed location. And in response to this, a fan named Samuel Irish posted a video offering his services to relocate the statue.
"If you need someone, I am very free to do it. Like, the most free. My schedule is clear open for a while now. Thank you for considering me, though."
And when Alex saw his video, he hired Samuel to do the job. And while many continued to believe that another fan had stolen the hat, Samuel would actually reveal years later in the 2024 documentary that the story was apparently false. Now this story was supported by Momo's post just 3 days after she found the statue. In it, she described how its hat was infested with ants, even before the police took it away.
"Unfortunately, the hat was gone because it was infested with fire ants, so they had to get a new one made. Asked the cops down at Reedsport about it because they showed up to help us pull it down. They're like, yeah, no, you don't want the hat. We threw it away. It was, someone picked it up and immediately got bit like 3 or 4 times."
Now finally on August 20th, fans discovered the statue's new home in Confusion Hill, a tourist attraction in California. And thankfully, it now sported a new and free hat. The famous statue is still in Confusion Hill, where fans can happily visit it. Meanwhile, the next story was made by a Gravity Falls fan artist, but it left fans horrified by how dark the story went. On September 8, 2014, the Gravity Falls episode Talk Oprah aired. The episode centered around Dipper agreeing to give Bill a puppet in exchange for the password to a laptop they found in a mysterious bunker. However, after shaking his hand, Bill chose Dipper as his puppet instead, so he possessed his body. Now the demon proceeded to torment Dipper's body. Yet despite how horrible this was to the character, it spawned something even more disturbing within the Gravity Falls community. Suddenly, fans were shipping the two characters, creating the Bill Dip fandom. Shipping, or a ship, is when fans root for a relationship between fictional characters, even if they're not romantically involved in the source material. This often results in fanfiction, fan arts, and fan comics. Now the Bill Dip ship is one of the most popular ones in the Gravity Falls community, generating more than 4,000 works on fanfiction website Archive of Our Own, and over 45,000 results on the story writing platform Wattpad. Now despite its popularity, however, Bill Dip is also one of the most hated ships in the Gravity Falls community. Part of this was because this ship became popular after an episode where Bill was mentally and physically attacking Dipper. Now what's more disturbing was that the harm itself became inspiration for fan content, often showing Bill as the aggressor while Dipper was forced into what many believed was an abusive relationship. Now making the ship sound worse for people was the massive age gap between the two characters. Bill, as I mentioned before, was a demon, and according to the show, he was at least over 1 trillion years old. Meanwhile, Dipper was born barely over a decade before the Gravity Falls story began. This meant that the fan content that showed Bill's interactions with Dipper, both the directly harmful ones and the supposed romantic ones, were being done by a demon on a... Now because of this, many Gravity Falls fans began targeting those who created Bill-Dip content, and it wouldn't take long before these online debates would escalate to harassment that affected people in real life. Artist Fruity Arcanine was one of the Bill-Dip shippers who were targeted. She often created fan art where the characters were in alternate universes, or AUs, most of which had Dipper and Bill as mystical creatures like sirens or half-deer, half-human hybrids. Adding animal-like creatures into the already troubling mix, Fruity Arcanine became a target of online attacks from those against this controversial ship starting in September 2015. Suddenly, she was flooded with anonymous messages, mostly accusing her of being a PDF file and being into intimacy with animals, and telling her to voluntarily leave the planet. In one of the messages, Fruity Arcanine responded with, "I'm sorry Anon if my artwork offends you. I didn't realize that someone other than myself, who has gone through the tragedy of being forced into participating in the act of forced intimacy with their pet deer by someone they loved when they were just small, would ignore the tags and obvious warnings that are plastered all over my blog, and scroll through all the posts to find something to trigger themselves with so they can complain and attempt to give their boring, meaningless life some sort of excitement by telling a stranger to voluntarily leave the planet." On September 10th, she also shared another post explaining why the Build-Up community mattered to her. "I was in a really bad place in my life, but do you want to know what saved me? How I found people who accepted me for who I am and cared for me? The Build-Up community. This community saved me. I owe them everything, and I will fight for them at any cost. As long as I have people who care about me, people like Envy and Mickey, I will never hurt myself again. I am loved and accepted, even though I have these disgusting thoughts." Now more Build-Up fans on Tumblr began sharing their story, and how the pairing was also their way to cope. Another Tumblr user named Down with Hirsch tried to explain how the ship helped them in hopes of spreading awareness. They said, "I disassociated heavily of my traumas, and so retracting the steps or sympathizing with Dipper in a relationship with Bill, who is abusive and an adult, helps me process my feelings, and in ways emulate my traumatic experience in a safe and controlled environment, where I choose what to expose myself to. It's empowering because nobody asks for intimate harm. It's something that happens, and there's no choice in the matter, but now I have control over the scenarios. I'm choosing to look at this content, and I'm choosing when to put myself in his shoes. Or other times I just disassociate the situation from my own traumas completely, and in that way I just sort of detach myself from my trauma, but handle the same subject matter constructively." However, there were still those who didn't trust their claims, and continued harassing these shippers. Now at the same time, not all Build-Up fans were people using the content to get through a traumatic event, and Down with Hirsch also addressed this in an extensive post, discussing how fans of the ship could still be dangerous to the community as a whole. "IRL PDF files are in the community, trust me, and when they see people condoning in so much as a fictional ship, they feel validated and excused, not to mention when most of the shippers are smaller people. Things get dangerous for them, because of the criminal-minded people in the community. They get off to drawn and written intimate content, and if that somehow sits well with you, you need to really think about your morals." And while there hasn't been any reported cases of the ship being used for criminal acts, there were reports of Build-Up creators being stalked online and even doxxed, driving some of its fans away from the community out of fear of being attacked. And with the Build-Up community still being active today, so is the massive hate towards them. Meanwhile, another popular ship with Dipper gained a well-written fan comic, only for things to take a dark and unexpected turn. Now another character that Dipper was shipped with was Pacifica Northwest, the descendant of the Gravity Falls town founder. Now she was introduced as a typical mean girl who looked down on the Pines twins.
I'm Mabel. That sounds like a fat old lady's name.
Until she and Dipper discovered that her ancestors lied about being the town's founder to gain wealth and forced the townspeople to do hard labor.
You want to know why this room was locked up? This is what I found in here.
Now this discovery led to Pacifica turning her back on her family.
Is this bell broken?
Our family name is broken, and I'm gonna fix it.
And having a healthier friendship with the twins.
Yes! We did it!
And so the fans began shipping her and Dipper into what's known in the fandom as Dipsifia. Now amongst those in the Dipsifia community was the DeviantArt creator Turquoise Space 35, who started posting fan arts for the ship back on December 30th, 2015. And as the years went by, Turquoise art began to closely resemble the original cartoons, making her fan comic even more disturbing, as it looked like a real continuation of Gravity Falls. On March 1st, 2019, Turquoise posted the first panel of her fan comic titled Deal. It showed a new character in Gravity Falls named Gwen, who was about to make a deal with Bill when a grown-up Dipper stopped her. The story was set around 30 years after the end of Gravity Falls, and Gwen was the daughter of Dipper and Pacifica. Gwen asked Bill to show her the truth in exchange for freeing him, and when Dipper interrupted the deal, Gwen demanded her father to tell her the truth about her long-lost twin brother, Philip. She even held out a photo of Pacifica taken right after giving birth to 2 children, Gwen and her twin. However, Dipper looked confused. Even when Gwen revealed that Philip gave her the photo, Dipper denied knowing about it. And this was because Philip wasn't the name they gave to her twin brother. And even more, there was no way he could have given her the photo because her twin was gone. But before he could actually say more, Bill attacked Dipper to distract him and keep him away from his daughter. And the next time Dipper was going to see Gwen, she had already shook Bill's hand, making a deal with him. Now this allowed Bill to take Gwen's mind and fulfill his promise to give her the grim truth about her brother. Now Bill showed Gwen that her mother had given birth to a twin brother, whose real name was Dustin. However, not long after giving birth, Pacifica began experiencing nightmares that also caused her to start sleepwalking. Now she believed that Bill was plaguing her mind, so Dipper tried to find ways to protect his family. But before he could, however, something happened that would be far too disturbing for a Disney cartoon. While Pacifica was left alone with their children one day, she fell asleep, and this allowed Bill to possess her mind, showing her children turning into monsters. Bill then finally showed himself to Pacifica, confirming to her that this was all his fault, and so Pacifica decided to fight back. She grabbed a golf club and attacked Bill, and when she finally hit the demon, she realized that it wasn't Bill she was aiming for, it was Dustin, her son who she'd just given birth to, no more than a few months ago. Gwen watched her brother's life drain away, breaking down in tears as her mother carried Dustin's body. Dipper then returned, only to find his wife cradling their lifeless son in her arms, and their family destroyed. Now the guilt of having killed Dustin broke Pacifica, so much so that she couldn't bear to even look at her daughter, since she looked too much like her brother. And unable to help his wife cope with their tragic loss, Dipper made a haunting decision. Dipper visited Mabel and used a memory gun on her. The device was made to erase memories, and Dipper erased the memory of his son from the minds of everyone who knew him, including Pacifica, leaving only a few hidden pictures and his own memories as proof that Dustin ever existed. But as dark as this comic was, this wasn't the end. Bill then took Gwen to the home of her grandfather, Preston Northwest. In the comic, Preston had a grudge against Dipper for driving his daughter away and defeating Bill, whom he invested money into, thinking that the demon would reward him after Weird Mageddon. And so, Preston had made a deal with Bill to destroy the Pines family, though he was horrified to learn that Bill used his grandson and daughter to punish Dipper. Now Preston mourned how he allowed Bill to orchestrate his daughter's worst nightmare and his grandson's death, but since he was bound by his deal with the demon, he agreed to continue with their plans. He'd taken a sample of his grandson's blood to clone him and raise the new Dustin. The clone would be convinced that his parents abandoned him, and in turn he'd speak to Gwen and convince her to make a deal with Bill. Of course, this cloned grandson turned out to be Philip. Now ultimately the plan worked, as Gwen had made a deal after speaking with the clone of her dead brother, and as for Bill, his deal with Preston didn't give him a physical form in the human world, and so he targeted Gwen to possess her instead, making his return far worse for Dipper, who witnessed her transformation. Now meanwhile, Pacifica answered a knock on the door of their home and was surprised to find Philip, the clone of her son, and with tears in his eyes, Philip admitted that he did something wrong. And then, the end. Now after this cliffhanger was uploaded on DeviantArt on February 24th, 2021, Turquoise stopped posting new pages to the Deal story, leaving fans to follow the dark comic without answers. And while Turquoise comic was a hit to many, some did question if its themes were appropriate, given that Gravity Falls was a Disney cartoon. Now Dustin's fate at the hands of his own mother, and the reveal of this all being orchestrated by Preston, had Deal being dubbed as one of the fan comics that went too far. While in the Gravity Falls subreddit, users had pointed out how Dustin's last scenes were unnecessarily graphic. One even compared how the scene might even be too much for Deadpool, a popular Marvel comic known for its violence. Now so far, Turquoise seemed to not have addressed these comics, but she remained active throughout her DeviantArt and Tumblr accounts, and even though she stopped making comics for Deal, she continued making art with Gwen, Philip, and even Dustin, as if continuing their story in a different way. And based on these fan arts, it seemed that there was a conclusion to this comic. Outside the Deal gallery, a shorter comic was apparently titled Closer to the End. The first panel was posted on September 11, 2018, months before Deal even came out, as if it acted like a teaser to these events. The comic merely showed the spirit of Dustin watching over his sister, just before she made a deal with Bill. However, the cosmic entities in his dimension, where he was in, told him not to interfere, even after Bill successfully possessed his sister. Another image showed Gwen joining forces with her past lives, including Ford Pines, Stan's brother who first summoned Bill into Gravity Falls. The art hinted that Ford, Gwen, and their past lives were about to fight the demon. And then, this image showed the original characters joining hands with their children to perform the Zodiac ritual, which was also used in the last episode of Gravity Falls to banish Bill. Now this was posted on June 4th, 2021, months after Deal ended, and in the description, Turquoise said, "After overcoming adversity, after chaos and hidden truths, the prophecy was fulfilled, the members of the Wheel joined hands, and the demon of dreams was defeated once and for all." This suggested that after Bill took over Gwen's mind, the older characters managed to defeat him once again. However, there's even more. Just 4 days after, Turquoise posted a comic where Dustin's spirit made a wish for his family to have the life they wanted, and this apparently completely reset the timeline, creating an alternate reality where Pacifica and Dipper had triplets instead, Gwen, Dustin, and Philip. And so what started out as a dark comic full of family betrayals and unimaginable tragedies ended with a happy conclusion. This next Gravity Falls fanship, however, had a more disturbing effect on the community, since it directly influenced real lives, including the creator of the cartoon himself. Even before the Bill Dip community began, there was another controversial ship that involved Dipper Pines, and that was with his twin sister Mabel. This ship would be known as Pinecest, a play on their last name Pines, and in the word that describes relationship between close relatives. And since Mabel and Dipper were also born not so long after the show's story began, the Gravity Falls community had more reason to be enraged over the ship's uncomfortable content. What made the ship even more disturbing was its connection to the real world. You see, Alex didn't create Mabel and Dipper Pines out of nowhere. The characters were actually based on himself and his twin sister Ariel. Alex had been open about how Mabel and Dipper's personality and their close sibling relationship were based on his real-life relationship with his sister.
The premise of Gravity Falls is basically inspired by my relationship growing up with my twin sister Ariel. There she is.
Certain little things that the characters would do, like Dipper chews on his pen, and that Alex does that all the time. And certain things like that, I think maybe Mabel doing a little like boop boop, like these are things that I do to you.
Alex even created storylines surrounding Mabel based on his sister's childhood.
Favorite episode is probably Time Traveler's Pig, just because that's when Waddles gets introduced for the first time. And yeah, so that's the thing that was true to me. I was obsessed with pigs as a little kid and really wanted a pet pig.
And seeing how the Pines twins resembled the Hearst twins during their childhood, people got even more uncomfortable with the idea of the Pinecest ship. Yet the ship continued to gain popularity. Many discovered the Pinecest community through its prominent creators. One of their most notable creators was an artist known online as Limey404, who ran the Double Pines pages on Tumblr and fanfiction.net. Limey started by posting Pinterest stories on fanfiction.net on August 20th and 21st, 2012, just a month after the show premiered. Now within the same year, she moved on to creating fan comics and uploading them on Tumblr. This earned her such a massive following that the other works for the ship started being referred to as Double Pines art rather than Gravity Falls fan art. Now to address the controversial ages of these characters, many artists in the community made Mabel and Dipper older in their creations. But this created another problem. With the Pines twins being based on real-life siblings, those fan works had an eerie similarity to Alex and Ariel. And eventually the show creator himself took notice of these artworks and he responded on X on October 22nd, 2012. If you think that's weird for you, imagine how weird it is for me. Hashtag never base cartoons on your own family. But this wasn't enough for the ship to die down. Sites like Tumblr and Reddit became a battleground for those in the Pinecest community and those who were against it. Constant callouts and name-calling came from those in the anti-Pinecest groups, while the members of the group also reported that someone against the ship was doxxed because of their opinions. And eventually, Limey decided she'd had enough. On March 19, 2016, she posted on a Double Pines blog that, "I've had some good times on this blog, but today is one of those days where I have the urge to just delete." Now her supporters flocked together to discourage her from doing so, but months later, in July of 2016, the Double Pines blog disappeared. Now fans grew concerned as to why she decided to delete her popular blog, but eventually people started piecing their story together. In November of 2016, a Reddit thread discussed the blog's disappearance, with users sharing rumors that she was doxxed because of Pinecest, and that people threatened her by calling people in her real life, including her parents. However, Limey couldn't confirm or deny these rumors, since she became inactive in all of her other pages, like her personal Tumblr account and DeviantArt page. But then another troubling rumor started circulating. This one involves Alex Hirsch and Disney themselves. The story went that Limey's influence over the Pinecest fandom made her a target for a lawsuit over the disturbing content that Disney didn't approve of. According to the rumors, she received a cease and desist order from Disney, forcing her to delete everything. And the mystery as to what really happened to her would continue for years. Until finally, on January 26, 2021, someone reopened the Double Pines blog and posted, "Every time I see something about the actually existing rumor of how Disney and or Alex Hirsch legitimately sued me on the grounds of excessive fictional twincest fan art, and that's why I disappeared, I gotta have myself a little giggle. Like y'all, this is genuinely funny." This finally ended the rumor that Alex and Disney had sued a fan for their ship. And to finally clear the confusion, Limey would make another post on October 28, 2022, revealing the real reason behind her disappearance. "Creepy, pathetic aunties knew enough about who I was IRL to make me really uncomfortable. And the puritanical, burn the witch now, ask questions later online mentality has only gotten infinitely worse since then, and it just wasn't worth it to me anymore, so I hit the delete button." And this confirmed that the famous Pinecest artist was being threatened in real life for her artwork. And while her work was still beloved by a part of the community, the next fan creation left everyone so disturbed that even those outside the Gravity Falls fandom knew about it. On July 4th, 2024, Reddit user 77_Meg asked the subreddit, "Peter explains a joke," about this post. The post said, "How to anger a whole group of people with 2 images." Under that description, it showed an image of Dipper Pines and an entrance to a Taco Bell. 77Meg didn't know what this was about, but dozens of Reddit users immediately posted their reaction, recalling what was known as the most horrifying Gravity Falls fanfiction ever posted. Simply titled Dipper Goes to Taco Bell, the story was posted on fanfiction.net on August 23, 2012 by a user named Master of Te's Citrus Fruits, and just a week later, the website took the story down due to its adult theme that violated their terms and conditions. However, just 1 week of being up on fanfiction.net was enough for the story to gain notoriety that spanned over a decade. The title sounds innocent, hinting that it's about Dipper dining at a Taco Bell in Gravity Falls, and indeed it started out that way. The story began with the Pine twins arguing over lunch, when Mabel mentioned a Taco Bell in town. Hearing this, Dipper decided to have some tacos from the fast food chain, but his sister and Grunkle Stan refused to join him, saying that the place was smelly. And so Dipper went to the restaurant alone, only to discover that the place was suspiciously in the middle of the forest. The outside was full of pine needles and rusted picnic tables, as if no one had actually been there in a long time, and this actually made him doubt going inside. Yet he still went, since he was far from everywhere else, and so he had no choice to have lunch there. Now to his surprise, the inside looked like a normal fast food restaurant, not the desolate place he feared walking into. However, no other customer was inside, and the only other person there was the cashier at the register. And since the cashier declared that they only had tacos, Dipper ordered one for lunch. Soon enough, he received his order, and Dipper went on to enjoy the best taco he ever had. However, right after his first bite, he felt a stomach churn. Nature was calling, so Dipper rushed to the bathroom, which was at the opposite side of the restaurant, and just before he reached the stall, he saw another person walking out, carrying a plastic bag. Now finally, Dipper arrived at his stall, but he realized that he was too late. His underwear was already a mess. And though this part was already disgusting, the fanfiction got much worse. The sight of his soiled clothes excited him, and so Dipper went on to have his private moment with himself inside the bathroom stall, over and over again. But after finishing his business and repeating the deed numerous times, he did things too hard and injured himself. The injury caused him to bleed, and the sight drove him into a mental breakdown. He screamed for help, but no one was there to save him, and minutes later, he bled to death. Now this story is already horrifying, especially since it was made in the universe of a Disney cartoon, but the story gets even darker. After the Dipper incident, the fanfiction continued with Mabel's story. Back in their room, she started to get worried that her brother hadn't returned, so she decided to look for him, and she eventually reached the mysterious Taco Bell, and to her horror, she found Dipper's lifeless body, lying down in the mixture of mess that he made, and in grief, she kissed him. Now this kiss triggered a disturbing interest in her. Mabel felt excited by having Dipper in her arms, and the rest I can't even talk about. With such graphic and disturbing content, it was no surprise that the story was taken down from fanfiction.net. However, since then, it had been re-uploaded within the site and other fan-dedicated websites like Tumblr, where people were quick to express their disgust over the story. And since its release, Dipper Goes to Taco Bell has joined the list of most disturbing shock fics, a term used for fanfiction that was written purely to shock the readers. Now meanwhile, the writer of this fanfiction, Master, was enjoying the fame and even posted an explanation about the story in their WordPress blog 1 week after their work was deleted. They revealed that they didn't actually come up with the plot of Dipper Goes to Taco Bell. It was based on a true story. Years before the Taco Bell story was uploaded, Master met someone during a hockey game, and this person just kept bringing up disgusting stories. They shared, "I didn't pay attention to most of them, but there was one that really got to me. He told one how a local restaurant was shut down because something happened there, and the something being the events of Dipper Goes to Taco Bell." This was the inspiration of Master's fanfiction. However, they didn't give any specific detail about the story they heard, so no one was able to confirm which restaurant inspired the events of Dipper Goes to Taco Bell, or if the story was actually true or not. As for why they chose Taco Bell as the location, Master explained, "So one afternoon I went to Taco Bell, and I got perhaps the worst service ever. The cashier was rude and obnoxious, the manager was lazy and stupid, and when I finally got my burrito, it tasted like waste. I was so angry that I wanted to write an angry letter to Yum Brands. However, after thinking about it for a long time, I turned an angry letter into a Gravity Falls shock fic." They also clarified that they wrote the fiction as more like a joke, even adding obvious spelling errors so that people won't take it seriously. However, they also admitted that part of their goal was to write something worse than the popular shock fics from other fandoms. So seeing all the reaction posts from their deleted fanfiction, Master knew that they accomplished exactly what they wanted. Their work even inspired a short film on YouTube that was posted just 3 days after the story was originally uploaded. And years after, Dipper Goes to Taco Bell still holds the title of the most disturbing Gravity Falls fanfiction. And while the disturbing actions within this fanfiction made it famous, our next Gravity Falls figure faced the end of their career for the unwanted advances they did to real people. The Gravity Falls show ended in February of 2016, with a 3-part finale about Bill's apocalyptic event called the Weirdmageddon. The event allowed Bill to control reality and create a portal for monsters to cross into the human world. One of these monsters was known as the horrifying, sweaty, one-armed monstrosity.
"Hey, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you about going inside my mouth."
Who was voiced and even modeled after the appearance of famous comedian Louis C.K.
Just ignoring me. That's seriously rude to just ignore someone like this.
However, nearly 2 years later, in December of 2017, people rewatching the Armageddon episode noticed something different with the one-armed monstrosity.
Just ignoring me! That's seriously rude to just ignore someone like this!
His voice was a bit different from the episode's first air, and as it turned out, Disney removed Lewis's voice and redubbed the monster's lines using Alex's own voice. And this was because Disney and many other studios began avoiding Lewis after some very serious allegations started to surface about his interaction with female comedians. Just a month before, on November 9th, 2017, prominent news organization The New York Times published an article about 5 women working in the comedy industry experiencing unwanted advances from someone they previously looked up to, and that person turned out to be Louis C.K. According to the article, comedy duo Dana Min Goodman and Julia Wolof got their big break in 2002 when they were invited to perform at the US Comedy Arts Festival in Aspen, Colorado. And this is when they encountered Louis, who invited them into his hotel room for a drink after the show. However, when they arrived, Louis asked them for permission to take something specific out of his pants, if you know what I'm saying. The women laughed, thinking it was a joke, and that was until Louis started to do something really disturbing. He removed everything he was wearing and began satisfying himself in front of the ladies. Dana and Julia were shocked and didn't know what to do, so they just waited for it to be over and then left. Now, they immediately reported what happened to their mentor, Sharna Halper, but Sharna told the New York Times, "I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to tell them to do." But Dana and Julia didn't want to simply ignore what happened, so they attempted to spread the words about Louis's disturbing behavior to warn other women in the industry. However, Julia said that within 24 hours after the incident, "We could already feel the backlash. People in the industry treated them like they were the ones causing problems." And eventually, their story reached Louis's manager, Dave Becky, who then confronted their manager, Lee Kernes, to get them to stop talking about the incident. And this allowed Louis's actions to simply continue. Another comedian, Avi Schachner, also shared that in 2003, she was on the phone with Louis to discuss an upcoming show, when he suddenly diverted the conversation to her appearance. Now, after he complimented her, Louis started talking about his intimate fantasies, before he began to breathe heavily and making other sounds that led Abby to believe that he was doing something to himself. Now, Abby told the New York Times, "I definitely wasn't encouraging it. You want to believe it's not happening." She admitted at the time that she didn't know how to end the call, and after the incident, she told a friend about it, and how it nearly made her quit her career in comedy altogether. Now then, in 2005, actress and writer Rebecca Corey was working on a TV show with Louis when she had a similar experience.
Walking to set to shoot my scene, and he approached me and got really close to my face and said, "Can I ask you something?" And I said yes.
Louis then directly asked if he could please himself in front of her. Fortunately for Rebecca, she was able to say no before Louis could actually begin. She even called him out for doing this, pointing out that he had a daughter and a pregnant wife at the same time.
I wanted to sort of pretend like it never happened. I mean, I wanted to do my job. Those opportunities are few and far between. I most certainly didn't want to be the person that was responsible for shutting down a production or even being part of the narrative.
Now, the New York Times also spoke to a 5th woman who wanted to remain anonymous, so we'll call her Amy. According to Amy, she was in her early 20s when she worked in the production of the Chris Rock show back in the late 1990s. Louis had been a writer and producer then, and he would often ask her to watch him perform something to himself. And as someone new in the industry, she felt like she couldn't say no to someone as influential as Louis. Amy explained, "It was something that I knew was wrong. I think the big piece of why I said yes was because of the culture. He abused his power." Now, the women's stories immediately spread all over social media and entertainment news outlets. And when confronted about trying to silence Dana and Julia back in 2003, Dave claimed that, "I don't recall the exact specifics of the conversation, but I never threatened anyone." However, just a day after, on November 10th, Louis dropped a confession to the media, saying, "These stories are true. At the time, I said to myself that what I did was okay, because I never shot a woman in my private area without asking first, which is also true. But what I learned later in life, too late, is that when you have power over another person, asking them to look at your private area isn't a question, it's a predicament for them. The power I had over these women is that they admired me, and I wielded the power irresponsibly. I also took advantage of the fact that I was widely admired in my and their community, which disabled them from sharing their story and brought hardship to them when they tried, because people who looked up to me didn't want to hear it. I didn't think that I was doing any of that because my position allowed me not to think about it." And with this confession, the film, TV, and comedy industry delivered their own verdict. Many projects that included Louis were either cancelled or removed from streaming sites, like HBO On Demand. The November 17th premiere of his upcoming film titled I Love You Daddy was also cancelled and hasn't had any release as of early 2026.
If I stay here for a few more days?
Let me think about it.
Then there was his work in animations. Disney decided to redub Louis's lines in Gravity Falls and removed his names from the credits, though the one-armed monstrosity still resembles the comedian. So far, none of the ladies have filed any lawsuits against Louis, and as for the comedian himself, he backed away from the spotlight, but that only lasted a couple of months. He was welcomed back into the comedy stage on August 26, 2018, performing and receiving standing ovations at a comedy club as if nothing ever happened. Up next, let's talk about the most terrifying crimes in the Loud House community. The Loud House is a popular Nickelodeon animated series centered around an 11-year-old boy named Lincoln and his 10 sisters. It began airing on May 2nd, 2016, and 10 years later, the show had produced 9 seasons, a spin-off series, several animated films, and live-action adaptations, making it one of Nickelodeon's most successful titles in recent years. And with some episodes having as many as 2.2 million viewers, many fans started creating content inspired by the franchise. One of these creators was Javi Zutsumiya, who I'll just be calling Javi for short, whose creations on the art-sharing platform DeviantArt closely resembled the original show. But Javi's convincing art style made his work even more disturbing, since he often portrayed not-of-age characters from the show in inappropriate situations. He even made artworks where Lincoln had a family with his younger goth sister Lucy, making him known in the community as someone who supported loudcest, which is a disturbing non-canon subculture in the community that creates fanfiction portraying Lincoln in an inappropriate relationship with either one or sometimes even more than one of his sisters. And although the loudcest content already made most people uncomfortable, Javi's most popular fan comic took things even darker. Beginning on April 23rd, 2019, Javi began posting his fan comic titled It's Not Your Fault. The first page showed an older Luna, the third oldest sister and the musician of the family, approaching her childhood home in what looked like the Christmas season. It was implied that Luna hadn't seen her family in years because of something she did that made her ashamed. And just when Luna began hesitating about this family reunion, someone opened the door, but Luna hid away just before the girl at the door could actually see her. The girl, whose name was Lena, turned out to be Lincoln's daughter. She told her father that she thought she heard Luna outside, expecting her long-lost aunt to show up that day. However, Lincoln doubted that his older sister would arrive. Instead, he asked Lena to help her aunt Lucy with finding her vampire bust in the attic. And as she began looking for it, Lena discovered Luna's broken guitar, which finally made her ask Lucy about what happened that made Luna leave the family. And this is where Lena revealed that days ago, she'd actually encountered Luna by accident. And that's when she invited her long-lost aunt over for dinner on Christmas. However, Luna hinted that she did something that broke the family apart. And though Luna refused to say what it was, Lena wanted to know the truth. So she threatened to break Lucy's vampire bust if she didn't tell her the full story. And since the bust was her prized possession, Lucy had no choice but to tell her the horrible truth. It turns out 11 years ago, Lena's mother, Sam, was introduced to the Loud family as Luna's girlfriend. Despite her family accepting Sam, Luna worried that her chaotic siblings would ruin their relationship. So she later made a deal with Lincoln that she would help him with his crush, Stella, in exchange for him keeping their sisters away from Sam. Now the following day, Sam and Luna's friend, Mazzy, announced that she signed them up for a battle of the bands. Meanwhile, Lincoln tried to talk to Stella, using Luna's advice about being confident. Now Stella hesitated about dating him at first, but after recalling how much he'd helped her when she transferred to the school, she agreed to be Lincoln's girlfriend. The two then shared their first kiss, which was accidentally witnessed by Lincoln's friends, but luckily his friends supported him, all except Rusty, who was jealous since he liked Stella as well. Now later at home, Luna shared her nervousness about performing in Battle of the Bands, so Lincoln promised to help them practice. Now weeks later, Luna was still so stressed about the performance that she took her frustration out on Sam. She accused Sam of flirting with Lincoln since she spent more time with him whenever she visited their house. Now to make matters worse, Luna believed her girlfriend only got so close with the family since Sam's father abandoned him, and hearing that triggered Sam's trauma of seeing her father leave, so she ran off as well. Now Lincoln later found Sam crying in the rain. Worried, he convinced her to go to their house to warm up, and since none of his siblings or his parents were home, Lincoln and Sam were left alone while waiting for the rain to stop. Now during this, Lincoln noticed that Sam had marks on her arms since she'd been harming her skin. Sam admitted that since her parents' divorce, both her and her younger brother hadn't been the same, and this is why she started attacking herself. Now to help her feel better, Lincoln played some music and danced with her, unaware that Rusty had passed by and had now seen him with another girl. Now with Rusty jealous over Lincoln dating Stella, he decided to record the moment to destroy the two's relationship. And just then, Sam teased Lincoln about kissing her, which Rusty thought was a perfect moment to capture. However, she was only joking and had Lincoln kiss Lucy's vampire bust instead. Now a disappointed Rusty ran just as Luna arrived to apologize to Sam. Still, Rusty had enough photos to edit and make it look like Sam and Lincoln actually kissed. He immediately sent it to everyone in school, which reached Luna, Sam, and Lincoln that same night. Now this led to Luna confronting her brother and her girlfriend, destroying the chance of repairing their relationship. And worst of all, by the following day, Sam got bullied for allegedly kissing a younger person, as she was around 4 years older than Lincoln, who, unlike her, was still not of age. And so she ran away and hid from everyone. Meanwhile, Stella broke up with Lincoln, and with his girlfriend and even his sisters blaming him for what happened, he isolated himself from his family. One night, a depressed Lincoln received a text from an unknown number, asking him to meet at school, and to his surprise, the person who texted him was a drunken Sam, who led him to the music room to kiss him. Now Lincoln rejected her, but Sam argued that since everyone thought she attacked a smaller person like him, she might as well be a real criminal. Now Lincoln tried to comfort her and promised to clear her name, but this only convinced Sam that she wanted to be with him, even if it was by force, and so the night that followed would traumatize Lincoln, as Sam got exactly what she wanted. Now days later, his siblings managed to prove that the photo of him and Sam was a fake. Learning this, Luna tried to apologize to her brother, but none of them knew what happened between him and Sam, so Lincoln continued to shut himself from everyone as he tried to cope with that evening. Meanwhile, Sam was worried because she got a positive on the pregnancy test. This revealed that their daughter, Lena, was the result of a disturbing crime against Lincoln. Now while many eagerly followed the fan comic for the dark themes and accurate artwork, many were also very disturbed. People questioned, why is Luna treated like a villain when Sam is the one who actually decided to touch a smaller person? And another person worried that, I feel like someone should check this artist's hard drive. I swear they made more questionable art. Now the community was also bothered by how Javi treated the Lincoln and Sam ship like a normal relationship, despite how traumatic it began. He even made shorter comics that depicted the two having an active intimate life that Lincoln's parents supported. One YouTube commenter tried to explain this by saying, when you know that victims often become hyperactive about intimacy as a trauma response, the scene with Lincoln and Sam talking about how much private evenings they have hits kinda like psychological horror. After It's Not Your Fault's Part 1 ended 3 years later, on May 24th, 2022, DeviantArt user Real Gilbert Gann posted a journal in August of the same year, saying that Javi is in fact a nutcase who's drawn a series of NSFW works that mostly containing not-of-age characters doing explicit stuff. About his comic on Sam and Lincoln, it just glorifies stuff like homophobia, hating certain characters, most specifically Luna Loud, and intimate attacks in one of those pages, where an intoxicated Sam Sharp committed the crime on Lincoln with her consent and got pregnant. His other comic titled More Than a Love Potion on his Pixiv even justified the glorification of sibling relationships where in an alt universe, Lincoln and Lucy, along with other girls above or around Lincoln's age, had intimacy with them. Now another user, named Redeeming Deviant, also added Javi to their list of artists to avoid, due to their questionable art. Now despite the criticisms against him, Javi continued with part 2 of his fan comic, which diverged from the family drama into something more like a science fiction thriller. Now while Javi created and altered the story that made a lot of Loud House fans uncomfortable, the next artist's creation got real people involved in their strange fantasies. Now another Loud House content creator famous for all the wrong reasons was Montana Jackson, better known as Tana Sweet 123 on DeviantArt. On the surface, she was just a DeviantArt artist in her late 20s who drew fan art for a Nickelodeon cartoon, but since 2017, her regular fan arts have been mixed with something else entirely. Montana had a specific way of drawing characters that looked absurd at first, but grew more disturbing the more she made them. This was because Montana was drawing the Loud House siblings, all of whom weren't even college level, in these strange, bloated bodies, like they were inflated balloons. Now this style of drawing had many names, like morbid obesity scenarios, body expansions, and blueberry inflations. And while they might be mistaken as comical content, these inflated drawings were actually made to satisfy a certain adult audience, with rather specific and peculiar obsessions and interests. Now this style used on a show made for younger viewers was already troubling enough, but Montana took it further by drawing all the Loud siblings this way, including the youngest, Lily, who was still in diapers. And with DeviantArt being easily accessible to any Loud House fan, those within the actual target audience of the show could see Montana's artwork. Now Montana faced criticisms over her art throughout the years, and she repeatedly denied that her artwork was meant to be mature. However, she did submit her artworks to a Loud House DeviantArt group called Specific Interest House. The group name itself announced what the artworks were meant for, so they were eventually taken down in 2019, to which Montana responded by saying, the site deleted the Specific Interest House due to inappropriate content. That's not fair. I never use anything overly mature. When will this badness end? Now throughout the years, Montana would post reviews on what was appropriate for shows meant for smaller humans, which many had criticized her for. Like when Disney released a reimagined version of their short animated film Knickknacks in 2003, Montana complained about a change in one character's design. She said in an August 2021 post, as if Disney couldn't get any more carried away with their kid-friendliness, they edited out the classic short, Knickknack, and made Miami's chest flat. Disney needs to stop making nearly every girl flat-chested and give them naturally big chests, for God's sake. And then a year later, when a fan-made series called Little in the Loud House got removed from YouTube for inappropriate content in 2022, Montana posted on her DeviantArt and said, I swear YouTube is being run by monkeys nowadays. When someone uploads an uncensored video with blurred lines, it's okay. But when someone uploads something cute and innocent like that of a giant woman, where in 2 episodes of Little in the Loud House we see tiny Lincoln jumping on Luna's belly or napping on Lily's belly, they think it's a no, just because they think bare bellies on cartoon kids and teens is wrong? Now given Montana's art and her views on what was was appropriate for cartoons, YouTuber PMZ Power posted a now deleted video in August of 2021 where he called her a PDF file. Now Montana posted on her DeviantArt about the video, telling her followers, "If you see the video, report it and take it down." And apparently this is how Montana handled criticism. As one thread detailed in the Loud House forum the same year, "She makes a lot of interesting art on smaller humans through inflation, gain weight for intimate purposes, and stuff like that. And not only that, she made unoriginal and cringeworthy content by making hate art, filled in reaction memes, and so on. Plus she's a review poser that she bashed on the episode and any media she hates and used opinion as facts. You ask me, she's a woman child who cannot handle criticism and playing victim cards to get out her troubles whenever she gets called out for disturbing interests and stuff like that." Now despite this reputation, Montana maintained a loyal following, with the same commenter in the Loud House forum saying, "Let's not get started on her fanbase, aka white knighting, who not only wastes no time defending her, block botting, and mass abusing report when someone rants on her, mindlessly defend her art on smaller humans, and promote themselves PDF file apologists." By the way, in case you didn't know, the term white knight means an internet user who rushes to defend other users in hopes of getting romantic favors or validation in return. And one of these people who Montana had accused of being a white knight was a DeviantArt user called BlueSpider17, who pushed back when another user named Darkcry called their art an attack on smaller humans around June 2022. Now BlueSpider responded to this by saying, "He claimed that Tana's Sweet 123 drew Mei Lee from turning red in her underwear, and the fact that she's a middle schooler in his other proof that my friend is a PDF file. Has he not seen most shows? Smaller people are shown in their underwear, yet the writers behind those aren't PDF files as far as I'm concerned." Now another of Montana's defenders, Loud Harvey Lefty, added to this post and said, "Don't like it? Go look at something else." Now the idea of "don't like it, don't look" has become the go-to argument for Montana defenders. And while they insisted that she was doing nothing wrong since her art was about fictional characters, things were about to get worse, because Nickelodeon was soon about to give Montana real faces to work with. On November 3rd, 2022, Nickelodeon released the first movie of The Really Loud House, a live-action adaptation of their animated series. And since it was a live-action movie, the Loud siblings were played by real actors, who were roughly the same age as their characters. Now these real-life actors were inspired by Montana's art, as she also used their faces and edited them in the same inflated artworks, with actual smaller humans who could see themselves getting involved in this kind of art. Now Montana's page eventually got bombarded with community reports, and this resulted in most of her inflation art getting removed from DeviantArt by late 2025. Though her page is still active and she continues to post to this day. Now, meanwhile, in this next case, multiple women's lives and careers were nearly destroyed just because they met the person behind the entire Loud House franchise. The Loud House was created by Chris Savino, who began his career in animation in 1991. He started out as a layout artist for the Ren and Stimpy show, and for over 2 decades, he built a solid portfolio by being a writer and storyboard artist for Dexter's Laboratory and the animation director for Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Now, by the time the Loud House started airing, Chris had already been in the animation industry for nearly 3 decades. But his legacy came with disturbing stories. His secrets would begin to unravel in October of 2017, just a year and a half after the show first aired. Just days after the allegations against film producer Harvey Weinstein shook Hollywood, a group of female animators created a private Facebook group to discuss their own stories of harassment in their industry. And the very first story opened the floodgates against the Loud House creator himself. The post came from then 25-year-old storyboard artist Cheyenne Curtis, who described her experience when she was starting out in the animation industry 3 years ago. According to her, an influential showrunner offered to mentor her if she'd have an intimate relationship with him. Although Cheyenne didn't mention his name, several women in the Facebook group, including Cartoon Network manager Stacey Renfro, told her, "I know exactly who you're talking about." And every single one of these women pointed to one man, Chris Savino. Now, not long after Cheyenne's post, a wave of similar stories about Chris flooded to the group. Though their posts were never made public, some of them would come forward with their stories through interviews in the months that followed. One of them was then 35-year-old Ann Walker Farrell, who was the director for BoJack Horseman and the Mr. Men show. She claimed that back in 2004 and 2005, when she was in her early 20s, Chris had tried to convince her to send photos of her body and pressured her to engage in explicit conversations. Now, Cheyenne also added a more detailed encounter with Chris back in 2012, when he was 41 and she was in her early 20s. She said, "Chris kissed me, even though he knew he had power over me with his career and his age. I felt and still feel that his true intent was never to help my career, but to help himself to me." Meanwhile, Stacey and film director Joanne Leach shared that Chris would talk to them about other women's appearances and his intimate fantasies, which they felt pressured to listen to, fearing he could damage their careers. Now, another woman, who I'll call Amy, shared that when she was 22, Chris had asked me for explicit pictures. Another night, he sent me a picture of his private stuff and told me a dirty secret about how he did stuff to himself. Then years passed and I visited Nickelodeon to join one of my friends for lunch. He learned I was in town and started asking me again by text why I never visited him, and being so annoying and aggressive. He also asked me to hook up with him before I left LA, and told me if I would do inappropriate things with him, he would give me a freelance job as well. Now, one of the Facebook group's administrators at the time was Megan Dawn, who was an artist for animated movies like How to Train Your Dragon 2 and Trolls. And when she saw the numerous stories against Chris, she decided to contact Nickelodeon's HR department directly to make a formal report. And the effect was actually immediate. On October 17, 2017, just days after the Facebook group started, Nickelodeon placed Chris on immediate suspension, and just 2 days later, on October 19th, the Loud House creator was officially fired from the network, while Michael Rubiner took over as the showrunner of the series. Now 4 days after that, Chris posted a public apology on Facebook saying, "I am deeply sorry and I am ashamed. Although it was never my intention, I now understand that the impact of my actions and communications created an unacceptable environment. I have nothing but the deepest respect for the bravery of the women who've spoken out, trying to create an environment in which they can thrive and reach their fullest potential." However, while speaking to BuzzFeed a year later, in June 2018, Megan responded to his apology with, "I think I'm sorry is not enough." Her response came months after she filed a legal complaint under the Animation Guild's bylaws in December 2017. The guild represented animation professionals in Hollywood, and Megan wanted Chris to face consequences for his harassment of women in the industry. 93 members of the union backed her up by signing the complaint, so a hearing was set 4 months later on April 7, 2018. On that day, 11 women spoke against Chris. 5 of them were direct victims and the other 6 were witnesses. And the accounts they shared covered experiences between 2004 and 2017 in 3 separate animation studios where Chris worked. Now, during the hearing, Chris didn't deny any of the allegations against him. Amy, the anonymous accuser, sent someone else to read her statement, as she didn't want to be in the same room as him. In her statement, she added, "There's no way he could manipulate us anymore. None of his strategies would work anymore. I don't want to look at you. I don't have to look at you ever again." Then, nearly 2 months later, on May 30th, 2018, after hearing the stories of multiple women, the Animation Guild ordered penalties against Chris. These included 40 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine donated to an organization that his victims chose, mandatory harassment training, and counseling. He was also suspended from the animation industry for 1 year, meaning that between early 2018 to 2019, he couldn't work with any studio whatsoever. Now, after years of Chris's unprofessional behavior, his victims saw justice finally being served. Now, despite the suspension being only for a year, Chris ended up choosing to leave the animation industry entirely. Instead, he shifted to publishing books, releasing Cole, a cautionary Christmas tale, in 2019, and non-fiction guidebook called Writing Cartoons in 4X in 2020. As of today, The Loud House, the show he created, continues on Nickelodeon and grows into a full franchise without him. Now, while Chris targeted professionals in the industry, the next Loud House creator went after people that the cartoon was made for, and he wasn't shy about posting his disturbing stuff online. As with many popular franchises, the Loud House inspired artists from around the globe, with many of them posting their art on the site DeviantArt. One of the most well-known Loud House fan art creators was Jonathan Desjardins. However, Jonathan wasn't known for good reasons. He joined DeviantArt as FunnyTime77 in early 2011, 5 years before the Loud House even began airing, and within months, Jonathan became known for drawing characters inflated like balloons, much like Montana from one of our previous stories. Now, what people found uncomfortable was how, despite the characters being inflated, they were drawn in positions that were almost explicit.
For some reason, he keeps doing the Microsoft Paint pictures of Sonic, Mario, and other characters if they were really fat or inflated. He also developed pictures of obese furries humping each other.
Now, just months later, in July 2011, critics began posting rants about Jonathan, calling him out for stealing art ideas, making low-effort fan arts, and creating inappropriate content. But this didn't stop Jonathan from posting and gathering more followers. And once Nickelodeon aired The Loud House in 2016, his entire DeviantArt page would revolve around that particular series. Jonathan treated the show as a masterpiece. He drew fan art, made crossovers using the characters, ran his own fan group called The Loudies, and encouraged anyone around him to watch the show. However, despite most of the main characters not even being old enough to drive, Jonathan would still draw them in his inflation style. Then around 2017, nearly 6 years after he began posting on his site, he posted a poll asking his followers which fictional character should be his girlfriend, and among the list were characters who were clearly not of age, including Violet from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, who was born barely a decade before the events of the movie. And between the poll and his constant inflation art, people suspected that Jonathan, who was already 22 at the time, was interested in smaller humans. And in 2019, his secrets would begin to unravel in front of the whole community. On March 13, 2019, a DeviantArt user named Boy published a journal titled Calling Out FunnyTime77 yet again. There he claimed that Jonathan had cheated on art trades, harassed female artists, bothered artists with inflation drawings, arrogantly tell people to give up their characters, and sent white knights to harass a person who didn't directly talk to him over a well-deserved ban from a server he was causing trouble in. I didn't even talk to him that much on the server, and it was Hunter and Hugh who were telling him not to send pics of inflated smaller humans since the rules said so. And then 3 weeks later, on April 3rd, this post was followed by another another post posted by a user named Empty Hammer, who claimed that Fighting Time 77 owns a Discord server in which several pieces on not-of-age characters are distributed and shown. The owner himself allows this to pass by, and will tag or ban anyone who tries to confront them over this, and immediately delete any form of proof. Now, with more people becoming aware of his interest in this kind of fan art, Jonathan finally addressed the accusations against him, though only indirectly. On April 14th, just over a week after Empty Hammer's post, he announced that he was leaving the Loud House fandom and closing the Loudies group, explaining that I don't want to remember the dark past about my past mistakes, because I learned from my mistakes and I don't want to make that mistake again. But 5 years later, the community had moved on from his troubling behavior. So on August 12, 2024, Wellner J50 posted a journal to expose what Jonathan had done during his time on DeviantArt. Besides the disturbing art and fixation over younger characters, Wellner detailed Jonathan's involvement with 2 users on DeviantArt. According to the post, Jonathan connected with DeviantArt user Mia the Pirate King back in 2016. At the time, Mia had just reached her teen years, while Jonathan was already in his 20s, and yet he convinced her to send him pictures of her stomach and feet. Now, Mia sent the photos, but not long after, her mother found out and ordered her to deactivate her account. Now, upon learning this, Jonathan had tried to convince Mia to disobey her mother, but ultimately she would actually delete the account. Now, apart from Mia's story, Wellner posted about Jonathan's obsession over DeviantArt artist Magic Christina KW, or Christina for short. Wellner claimed that he draws fan art of her with her favorite cartoon characters, and once claimed her to be his girlfriend, when in reality she's not. If she blocked him rightfully, do you think he'd move on and forget about her? He would whine and moan until she unblocks him. Now, that same year in 2024, with numerous people calling him out over DeviantArt, Jonathan finally deactivated his own account, saying, I feel like I kept on making too many mistakes, so I guess this is it. Goodbye, everyone. Since then, there have been no updates about Jonathan or whether Mia, Christina, or any other people he harassed ever confronted him outside of DeviantArt. Meanwhile, the next Loud House community member did more damage as he used emotional manipulation to control several of his younger fans. On July 10, 2017, a Peruvian YouTuber going by the name Razek02 created his channel, though he wouldn't upload anything until more than a year later, in August 2018. From then on, Razek became an active content creator for the Loud House community. But like the other creators we've talked about here, his creations were far too disturbing for a kids show. Apart from being poorly edited, the videos were mostly bizarre and inappropriate content about the Loud siblings, none of whom had even finished high school. He also covered other fan creations like It's Not Your Fault, even doing livestream interviews with the Loud House fanfic creators, including Javi from our first case. He also ran a Discord server where he presented himself as a friendly older voice, since Razek was in his early 20s, while most of the fans around him were often a decade younger. And with Razek getting popularity in the Spanish-speaking Loud House fandom, his Discord server also grew into its own community. On February 11, 2021, 3 years after he started uploading videos, Razek held a voice call within the Discord server to chat with his friends and other server members. And this was when someone dropped an accusation that forever changed his image in the Loud House community. A user named Stress Coffee confronted Razek during the voice call, revealing that they've had a relationship despite him being 24 while she was 9 years younger. She added that Razek also pursued an intimate connection with another user named Luna Crystal, who was a year younger than her. These accusations weren't without proof though, as Coffee had screenshots of Razek sending her and Luna inappropriate images. She also provided screenshots of her conversations with Luna about Razek where they discussed their relationship with him. Now, members who were present in the Discord call immediately called out Razek for targeting the two, and instead of denying or defending himself, Razek simply broke down in tears and begged Luna and Coffee for forgiveness. And at one point he even mentioned that his mother was in the room with him and she heard everything, so she was threatening to kick him out of the house. But his attempt to gain sympathy from his Discord members didn't work, as many of them began demanding that he delete the server along with his YouTube channel. And yet the stories didn't end with this Discord call, because another server member named Spartronus, who was in his high school years, came out with his own testimony shortly afterward. He mentioned befriending another member who was also a fanfic creator. We'll call her Millie. According to Spartronus, Razek connected with her and began monitoring her Discord activities, even preventing her from working on other fan content outside of his own. And all this was happening when Millie hadn't even reached her teen years yet. Now, with the stories of 3 smaller people coming out against Razek, he soon made his YouTube channel private. He would also delete both his Discord account and server, making it seem like the matter was settled. However, Razek wasn't ready to back down just yet, because in late March 2021, just weeks after he was exposed, he uploaded a new video on his YouTube channel titled You're Not Alone, Razek. This video featured Razek as a creator talking about the infamous Discord call with another Loud House content creator, Leo Vio. Also in the video was one of Leo Vio's original characters, Diana, who was also much younger than Razek. There, Diana was confronting Razek about the allegations against him. Razek even acknowledged Diana's age when she discussed her childhood, which she clarified as her current situation. This, however, didn't stop Razek from wanting to talk about relationships, and when Diana got uncomfortable and wanted to leave, Razek tried to gain sympathy from her to make her stay. And besides using a younger character to draw sympathy, Razek also had a segment in his video where other fan creators, including Leo Vio, were rallying behind him, reminding him that he wasn't alone.
No estás solo, Razek.
No estás solo, César.
No estás solo, Razek.
No estás solo, Razek.
No estás solo.
Razek, tú no estás solo.
No estás solo, hermano.
No estás solo, Chino.
Now, many in the community saw the video as an attempt to redirect sympathy towards himself, but there was also followers who supported Razek at this time. And not long after the video came out, Razek would upload a confession video on his channel, though he downplayed the situation, saying,
Lo cierto es que sí me involucré con dos personas con las que no debía. Asimismo, deposité demasiada confianza en personas que no se lo merecían. Las dos personas involucradas no cumplen con la descripción de niñas, siendo ellas ya adolescentes. Si bien no tuve actitudes que se puedan considerar adecuadas, fui respetuoso y en ningún momento mostré intenciones de acoso con las personas involucradas. En ambos casos, los actos fueron consensuados, es decir, ambas partes estuvieron de acuerdo en realizar, por ejemplo, llamadas de índole adulta, donde sentí que cumplía con mi parte, por más rudo y abrupto que fuera.
After trying to convince people that Coffee and Luna weren't the victims, Razek went on to discuss how the allegations affected him and his family.
Si bien mi familia y yo atravesamos un momento de mucho conflicto, todos estos contratiempos nos sirvieron para unirnos mucho más, sobre todo con mi madre, quien, junto a verdaderos amigos, evitaron que cometiera un pecado irremediable.
The sin he mentioned was his alleged attempt at ending his time on Earth, though there was no evidence that this incident really happened. Then, weeks after his confession, Razek began creating content on his channel again. And as he pretended that nothing happened, he also started deleting comments that mentioned his involvement with Coffee, Luna, and Millie. Meanwhile, Coffee began asking people to stop mentioning her story about Razek on social media. People found this odd, as exposing someone targeting these people was important to the community, making people wonder if she was being silenced. Now, nearly 5 years later, YouTuber La Red Del R, or Red for short, backed up this theory during his coverage of Razek's controversies on December 26, 2025. In the video, he documented how several online creators backed up Razek, and most of them had even appeared in his You're Not Alone video, making Red wonder if the Loud House community itself was protecting people like him. Now, this idea would be strengthened when Red also pointed out how most of these creators also made content that was kind of disturbing, painting a pattern of suspicious behavior among Razek's supporters. Now then, almost 4 months later, on April 19, 2026, Red would drop another video. This time it confirmed many of the theories against Razek and his supporters, because Coffee, the first victim who accused him, actually came out to tell her story.
Hola, yo soy Coffee, soy la chica que inició la funa previa a Razek. También soy la chica junto con la otra usuaria Luna que fuimos afectadas por el usuario de Razek.
Coffee would then detail how Razek was the one who pursued a relationship with her, even though he knew her age. Now, their relationship was as intimate as online relationships can get from the very start, but according to Coffee, it wasn't long before it became controlling, as Razek strictly prohibited her from telling anyone else about their relationship, and also forced her to cut off certain members of the server entirely. Now, despite this, Coffee stayed in the relationship because
La verdad es que me refugié en él porque Razek tenía mucha influencia dentro de la comunidad y casi todo el mundo estaba del lado de él.
Now, this all changed when Coffee learned about Luna getting involved with Razek, confirming that he was cheating on her. Coffee had become close with Luna during their time on Discord, and since she was younger, Coffee felt the need to protect Luna from Razek, and this was what finally made her reveal everything during that fateful Discord call. In Red's interview, Coffee also confirmed that many in the community knew about Razek's relationship with her and Luna before the call. This included content creator Shayamos MLP, who mostly made disturbing content about another show, My Little Pony, and surprisingly, Javi from our first case, who'd gotten closer to Razek by this point as well. Now, Coffee also clarified the reason why she was asking people to stop talking about the story after the public call-up. It turned out that Razek had attempted to sue her, even calling in a friend whom he claimed was a lawyer.
Según ellos, querían denunciarme por difamación al haberle arruinado la carrera, y todo este complot lo quisieron sustentar con la edad de consentimiento en Perú, que es de 14.
Now, she also confirmed to have received threats from Razek's fans, with some of them even leaking her mobile number and real photos online. And since she was in high school at the time, this pressured Coffee to ask people to stop talking about Razek. Now, this was until Red's video came out, and she found the courage to speak out. Red himself also received threatening messages from Razek's supporters, after he included their names in his first video. Now, around the same time, an anonymous user who claimed to be the brother of Double Eloy came forward. Eloy was one of the people Red called out for supporting Razek in his previous video, but as it turned out, Eloy had only joined Razek's supporters to gather evidence against him. Unfortunately, he never got the chance to make the evidence public, because on February 22nd, 2022, a year after the allegations began, Eloy actually died after struggling with leukemia. And as of fighting this, Razek himself hasn't approached Red about the videos. Instead, by early 2026, his YouTube channel would finally be deleted, a full 5 years after the allegations came to light. And while Razek's reputation was damaged for sure, at least his online activity didn't lead to any legal trouble, unlike this next person. By now, we've discussed how some members of the Loud House community took things too far, but this fan comic, simply titled The Loud Comic, was on a whole different level. The fan comic, released 10 years ago in mid-2016, was created by DeviantArt user JumpJump69, or JJ for short, who chose Luann Loud, the high school comedian and the 4th oldest child of the family, as his main character. But in this alternate universe of the show, she was obsessed with the show's protagonist and her younger brother, Lincoln. The comic included a lot of uncomfortable scenes between the Loud siblings, which included loud cess, stalking, and even murder. And much like Javi from our earlier story, JJ's art was alarmingly similar to the original show, making it look like an official comic. Since he involved beloved characters in disturbing scenarios, many called out JJ's comic, and eventually the people created a group known as the Safe House on Tumblr, which is a fan community platform. This group gathered people who were against the inappropriate content being produced using the Loud House characters, and they would also begin reporting JJ's comic, but nothing ever happened, for a while at least. That was until 2017, about a year after his comic was released, when one of the Safe House members discovered that JJ lived in the United Kingdom, where laws about inappropriate content were much stricter. Under UK law, it's illegal to draw cartoon depictions of younger people in explicit scenarios, even if no real person is involved. And with this, JJ's Tumblr was reported to the Internet Watch Foundation, or the IWF, the organization enforcing the UK laws on internet crime. And within days of that report being filed, nearly every one of JJ's accounts vanished. And then, in October 2017, JJ posted one final comic titled Jump Jump's Last Message on his new Tumblr page. The comic showed JJ himself sending a letter to Lincoln saying, "Dearest Lincoln, I must leave you. Why? I cannot say. Where I'm going, you cannot know. How I will get there, I haven't decided yet. But one thing I can tell you, anytime I hear the window blow, it will whisper the name Lincoln." Now this message left followers kind of confused, given that they didn't know about the IWF report. But then, almost 4 months later, on January 31st, 2018, JJ posted an explanation on a new social media account, saying, "It all started when a certain person decided to contact the authorities and tell them that I was up to no good. But from what I was told, they were told a little more. They were told that I just happened to be doing the one thing that you cannot do and will 100% get you in trouble. And so because of that, I was arrested in October. I had everything of mine removed, so all the projects I had been working on is now gone. Also because of this, I had my children taken away. I cannot begin to describe the absolute anguish that happens when you see the look on your children's faces when they are being taken away and they don't understand why their mother and father ain't coming with them." As it turned out, JJ was a married man, and according to him, the IWF report didn't just erase his social media pages, it sent a police raid to his home in October 2017. Officers searched JJ's home and seized his computers and devices, whilst children were temporarily removed by social services. And JJ was then arrested for making and sharing inappropriate content involving younger fictional characters. However, the allegation that the police received was apparently worse than what his fan comic actually was. Based on JJ's story, the anonymous reporter claimed that his content was traced from real photographs of people who weren't of age. Now what followed was months of legal battle, including JJ's fight to gain back custody over his kids. Now this case also pushed JJ to a breaking point, where he considered checking out from the world early. But in the end, since no evidence was found that his comics were based on real people, the judge ruled in his favor in January 2018, and his children were returned to their homes. But JJ himself had to leave until he could pass evaluations proving that he wasn't a danger to his family. And this left him homeless for now. But to JJ, "This is the first time since October that something good has happened, and I finally feel like I have my feet back on the ground." Now learning this, the fandom was divided. Some believed that creators like JJ needed to face legal troubles to stop the inappropriate content, while others treated the court outcome as proof that the Safe House group went too far. However, on November 21st, 2019, almost 2 years after JJ won the legal battle, an anonymous Loud House fan, who I'll call Vicky, told her story to a journalist on the publishing platform called Media. And Vicky claimed that she was the one who reported JJ to the IWF, but she clarified that she didn't mean to take things too far. "Jump made a post and even told me himself that he knows who got him in trouble, and said person apparently told the police he was using real-life inappropriate material to draw his Loud House stuff with. Again, I'm not sure how true it is, but that's what everyone believes now. So JJ says that he was arrested for tracing inappropriate material. I think I got him arrested because I alerted the IWF. So in the end, I really have no confirmation if IWF has any part to it." This meant that the claim about JJ using real material for his comic might have come from someone else, not the actual Safe House group. Now, despite already getting into legal trouble for his art and even temporarily losing custody of his own children, JJ has returned to creating art online, even continuing the Loud comic, which is still ongoing as of early 2026. And while the court has decided that JJ didn't directly harm a real person for his creations, the next Loud House fan was caught doing something far more dangerous. On September 13, 2024, at the Northside Park in Philadelphia, Mississippi, parents left their daughter, who I'll be calling Mary, while she was eating chips. What they didn't notice though was that at around 5:30 in the afternoon, a 23-year-old man had approached her and began sharing her snack without her permission. The man then invited her to his car to play a tickle game. The man was Denzel Clements, better known online as Purple Dino 100. He began posting the Loud House content on DeviantArt around 8 years earlier in 2016. His signature style was creating crossover content with the Loud House and the children's show Barney and Friends. In 2019, he began what he called the Barney House, which was his own alternate fan universe where the characters from Barney and Friends lived with the Loud House family. Both shows were made for younger audiences, so Denzel's work became widely accepted by young fans of these franchises. And beside the artwork on DeviantArt, Denzel also had a YouTube channel where he posted his speed paintings, along with his Barney impressions.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Pat Sajak and Vanna White.
Now, Denzel was open about being a big fan of Barney and Friends, so much so that on his 22nd birthday in 2021, he purchased a cameo video from Bob West, the original voice actor of Barney. Cameo is a website where fans could pay a celebrity to send a dedicated video for them, and for his birthday, Bob West sent this.
I hear that you have a birthday coming up, so, a certain someone and I are here to say happy birthday. Me! That's right!
Now, given his art and enthusiasm for the Loud House and Barney and Friends, Denzel seemed like an artist who didn't outgrow his childhood favorites. However, his actions offline would not be as innocent. On that September afternoon in 2024, Denzel tried to convince Mary, whom he didn't know personally, to go to his car, and her response was luckily to scream. Now, her parents were fortunately nearby, and they quickly rushed to her and called the police on Denzel, who immediately arrested him for attempted kidnapping. Now, despite what he did, he spent only 3 days in jail before getting let out. Now, the police claimed that they discovered Denzel had a history of mental illness, though they didn't clarify whether this was the reason he was released from jail. Now, the story went quiet since there was no news report about it, aside from one article on an online news provider, the Neshoba Democrat. That changed more than 2 months later on December 2nd though, when DeviantArt user SM Besties posted a warning saying, "If you're following @PurpleDino100, please be cautious, block and report." This post was followed by the article talking about him for people to confirm what Denzel had done. And just days later, Calvin Havani, another Loud House fan and streamer, broke the news to his audience during a live stream.
Found out that Purple Dino 100 got arrested. He was sent to jail earlier this year.
What? Are you serious? What happened?
Well, he is trying to... I don't know. Maybe he was too obsessed with drawings of bare feet and tickling.
From then on, people spread the word about Denzel, and some shared stories of his behavior. One person commented that he's been a creep for years, since he always made art of children getting tickled or their feet played with in some way. Now, as of making this video, there hasn't been any public announcement on whether Denzel was formally charged or not. However, he seemed to have returned to the online community in May of 2025, when an Instagram account named PurpleDino827 began posting art similar to his. However, his posts were bombarded with negative comments that mentioned the attempted kidnapping in 2024, and after June 2025, he stopped posting online and hasn't returned since. And finally, I'm gonna cover some crimes that happen in the brony community. Most people who see My Little Pony are inspired to be more positive in life, but instead, the bronies use the show to justify fascism and mass murder. Since the very start of the brony community on 4chan, it has had a problem with attracting the worst people out there. There have been multiple articles written by sites such as The Atlantic and The Rolling Stone about how the bronies have a problem. And in 2017, during the April Fool's Day event, where 4chan merged the My Little Pony and politics board, we saw some horrifying posts.
Sure, he made the wrong choice, but he made it for the right reasons. He was trying to help his friends. We've all done something silly for a friend, right? Who would Austrian Painter's favorite pony be? Probably Pinky, because he was fond of confections and would have admired her positive attitude.
But this was just the start, and things were about to get much worse. In 2012 on Tumblr, a user called Buttercup Do started making posts about how My Little Pony is a utopian society because it allows fascist ideals. And just over 7 years later, 2 years after the April Fool's Day incident, these writings had gained a cult following. And this actually led to the post being published in a book called My Nationalist Pony. Its description reads,
The cartoon series My Little Pony is beloved of little girls and grown men alike. In My Nationalist Pony, Brony blogger Buttercup Drew gives a new rightist reading to My Little Pony, arguing that in addition to its wholesome stories of friendship and self-acceptance, the series is implicitly Eurocentric, pagan, and deeply conservative.
And just to give you an idea of how horrible this book is, there are chapters such as Jesus Christ vs. Celestia and full The book also has a chapter on Martin Luther King, where he says some really questionable things. He goes on to argue that Equestria, which is the fictional kingdom and the main setting for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, was a utopia because all the ponies were ethnically homogeneous, and they resisted the influence of foreign cultures. He also said in an interview of a white nationalist website that the show represents friendship-based European ethnocentrism, and the white nationalists loved every bit of it. Greg Johnson, author of the White Nationalist Manifesto, said this about the book.
My Nationalist Pony, Buttercup Drew's Tumblr blog on the most iconic children's cartoon My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, is a masterpiece of culture jamming. He reads the stories as allegories, teaching perennial truths about race, heredity, caste, differences, self-actualization, virtue, and the divine. And he does it all without a hint of irony.
But while this was extremely weird, things got even worse as the next case actually drove a family insane. This entire story revolves around the pony called Stellar Eclipse. It is the original character of Sylvain Nicolas Levasseur Portelance. Sylvain was born on July 9th, 1996 in Simcoe, Ontario, Canada. And right from the start, it was clear that there was something terribly wrong with him. Sylvain always had tremors in his body, even when he was just a baby. He started walking between 16 to 18 months of age, but would just constantly fall as if someone was tripping him on purpose. But as he grew older, he found out that he had spinal muscular atrophy type 3, and suddenly everything made sense. But it also meant that he was cursed to always struggle when it comes to day-to-day tasks like walking or climbing stairs. But his illness had one silver lining. He was approached by the Make-A-Wish Foundation and could have anything he wanted. And Sylvain was actually a longtime fan of My Little Pony. So for his wish, he chose to have a pony called Stellar Eclipse, who would be his own original character in the universe. Stellar Eclipse is a male Pegasus who appears in season 4 of the show. He walks with a wheelchair cart and appears as a trader of Discord-shaped lamps at the Rainbow Falls Traders Exchange. Since then, he hasn't had any other appearances, but Sylvain was extremely happy that he was able to be part of the show nonetheless. Sylvain's story is undeniably tragic, and considering this, most people would treat Stellar Eclipse with much more respect than any other background pony. But instead, as soon as the brony community saw Stellar Eclipse, they decided it would be good clopping material. And if you aren't familiar with the term, clopping is the brony equivalent of playing with yourself in an explicit way. Some of the community members would go on to create heavy graphic content of the character, and when Sylvain's family found out about this, none of them were happy. This was Sylvain's one and only wish, and it was ruined in this way. Marie Anne, Sylvain's mother, even posted on this issue.
Sylvain is 17 years old, suffers from spinal muscular atrophy, and is a minor. Please remember that this was his pony, this was his beauty mark, this was his voice, and this was his wish granted from Make-A-Wish in DHX. He does not want his character defamed or degraded in any shape or form. Please be kind and see his pony for what he is, someone just like you and me.
But unfortunately, this did nothing to stop them, and more explicit content just kept getting made. Eventually, the Levasseur family was forced to accept that this was the way of the brony community and do their best to move on from the situation. Now, while this showed how insensitive the brony community could be, the next case goes straight into illegal territory and could have caused people to be jailed. This story starts at an innocent convention called the Bay Area Brony Spectacular Con. While most bronies and young fans of the show came for events like the Hoof Wrestling Rumble and panels like How to Draw a Pony, some visited the convention as vendors or to promote their own events. In BabsCon's Vendor Hall, a separate fandom convention, Sacramento's SAG Anime had set up a table to promote their own con. The SAG Anime table was run by the con staff and supporters, and according to BabsCon staff, they were located just 3 tables away from BabCon's own convention registration table. But when an year-old girl ran up to the SAG anime table asking if she could hide. The SAG anime staffers quickly realized that things were seriously wrong. After the con, a woman at the table named Callie, who had a Tumblr account under the name Saint Cheshire, described the incident in a post.
We met a little girl who was there with her family. She got a button drawn at our booth, told us all about her favorite ponies, and was overall just too damn cute. She had a My Little Pony lanyard filled with pins she's gotten in the vendor's room, and gave me a Fluttershy pin because she liked my cosplay. She ended up just hanging around with us for a while and being super cute. We call her Babby because she's 11 and precious.
So far, this sounds completely normal and a great experience for Babby. But things were about to get much worse, as Babby was going to have one of the most horrifying experiences of her life.
The next day, she runs up to the booth, terrified, and asks if she can please hide under our table for a few minutes. Turns out a dude had been following her around the con all day and tried to get her to come to his hotel room alone. She tells us she thought he was okay at first because he was wearing a My Little Pony shirt, but she didn't want to go anywhere with him, and he made her uneasy. At one point, after she'd refused, he grabbed her arm in the elevators and tried to get her to follow him. She ran and now just wants somewhere to hide.
This girl was asked to come to the hotel room of an adult brony, completely alone. There's no telling what kind of horrible things would have happened if she had really gone with him. But he wasn't about to give up that easily.
We tell her, of course, hurry her behind our booth and station ourselves around her, because she's 11 years old, and all of us are prepared to physically attack the human trash heap who tries to with her. Eventually, this very large dude strolls by, very obviously looking around, and she quietly points him out to us. At this point, I'm ready to set him on fire, but when I asked if she needs me to go report him, she shakes her head. She doesn't want to get in trouble or make anyone mad. We see him a few more times over the course of the day, because he keeps meandering over to our booth and just casually looking around. Eventually, he actually stops to take a flyer from our table and asks us a question, and we coldly send him on his way. We start sending a co-worker with Babby whenever her parents aren't around, because otherwise she's not safe.
Now, while the SAG anime staffers protected Babby, they unfortunately completely failed to realize the implication of what Babby had told them. This man was a possible predator, roaming freely in a con filled with young little girls. And no one from the SAG anime team alerted the BabsCon security that they had a predator on their hands. But they're not the only responsible party in this situation. A child can't just wander around a con on their own. So where were the parents during all of this? They actually knew that their year-old daughter was being pursued by a child predator, and they still didn't do anything to protect her. According to the SAG anime staff, the parents had been informed of the situation, but still allowed Babby to stay at the con despite the man stalking her. But eventually, Babby's mother sent a letter of clarification to BabsCon.
Hi, I am Babby's mom. My adult daughter and myself have some physical disabilities, so it was a challenge to keep up with the kids. To be clear, I was never informed about any kind of incident involving my daughter while at BabsCon. She didn't want to tell me because I wouldn't let her out on her own anymore. I was at the table several times that day and no one said anything to me about all of this. I would have contacted security and tried to find this guy.
The SAG anime staffers had claimed that the parents had been informed about the man and about the incident where he tried to get Babby to come up to his hotel room. But now the mother was actually claiming that she was never informed by the staff or by Babby until the con actually ended. But things were about to get even more confusing.
My daughter exaggerated about the elevator. He never put a hand on her, and she was never alone with him. She was on a very crowded elevator with him. We've had a serious discussion about all of this, and the importance of not exaggerating and not hiding this kind of thing from mom or security. We loved our time at BabsCon, and the safety we felt is probably why I let my guard down. With the hundreds of people in attendance, this was a slight accident.
This makes the story even more unclear and leaves us in doubt about what actually happened. But the most important thing to note is that Babby was in real danger. And as we'll see in the later videos, the brony community has many examples of adult male fans taking advantage of younger people. But while the man didn't succeed in getting Babby into his room, the next person on my list succeeded in getting a plushie into a world of nightmares. This is just a normal Twilight Sparkle plushie, and most people who look at it would think about hugging or petting the plushie. but instead, many of the members of the brony community add suspicious holes near the tails of these plushies, and then use them in explicit ways. But even among the bronies, Jin1515 took it to a whole nother level. He has a deviant art page, which has some innocent pictures of himself and a Twilight Sparkle plushie. But if you dig just a little deeper, it's easy to find some weird pictures. Like this one, where Twilight Sparkle is photographed next to a hookah, suggesting that she smokes. But this is still tame considering some of the other stuff Jin1515 has said and done. Around 10 years ago, Jin decided to write a long message to another user who went by the name of Kevin Sano. Kevin Sano is an adult material artist who mainly draws furry art. And the most important thing to note about him is that he gets explicit My Little Pony fan arts for his birthday, in addition to the ones he actually makes himself. Now, one of these fan arts featured Twilight, and when Jin saw it, he actually freaked out and made an extremely long post defending the character. In the post, he asked the artist to stop making adult content about Twilight and gave the following reason.
The reason I asked this is that Twilight is my fiance, and we're planning on getting married next June or July should everything go as planned financially speaking. And yes, I have actually found a wedding chapel that will let me marry someone that most people would consider a fictional character.
Just to be clear, this is a fully grown man claiming that a Twilight plushie is his wife. In the post, he does have some ideas of how absurd all of this sounds, but he doubles down on just how real Twilight is to him.
And I talk about her as if she is Twilight, because to me, she very much is. When I look at her, I see Twilight Sparkle. When I talk with her, I'm talking to Twilight. When I hold her in my arms and kiss her, there are no doubts in my mind that it's the mare I love, whose lips are pressed against mine. And every morning when I open my eyes and see her head on the pillow next to mine, with her gorgeous violet eyes staring back at me, I can't help but wonder how I ever got to be so lucky as to have a partner as smart, funny, beautiful, and all around wonderful as her.
He even goes on to explain that they have dates together and have real intimacy. It's important to still remember, this is all a comment on an explicit artwork of Twilight Sparkle. And it doesn't stop there, as he continues to talk about fidelity in his relationship with Twilight Sparkle.
Don't get me wrong though, this isn't a jealousy thing. I'm very secure in my relationship. I know without question that Twilight is just as faithful to me as I am to her. She's actually sitting on the couch next to me reading while I type this. She is very real to me, and I know she's not sneaking out in the middle of the night to do some freaky stuff with some famous artist.
He goes on to explain the way Twilight acts in the bedroom, along with her preferences, saying that she's very vanilla and is unhappy with being depicted differently in the art. Just to give you an idea of how horrifying this man is having explicit relations with a plushie of a fictional character. And the worst part is that this is still just scratching the surface when it comes to how depraved bronies can be, as we'll see very soon. Now let's take a deep dive into the worst of the worst, people who actually committed crimes. This next person on the list was taking advantage of a 14-year-old. Herbert Kenneth Huachaka was born on January 11th, 2005. And though he showed great promise during his youth, he's currently unemployed and lives with his mother. He often goes by the nickname Timmy, but unlike most unemployed 20-year-olds, Timmy actively advocates for doing explicit things with young people and animals. But before we get into that, we need to understand his brony persona. Danceburst is a copy of the character called Sunburst. And instead of accepting that it's a copy, Timmy actually made a whole timeline to fit his character into the show. And he genuinely believes that there are portals in this world that lead into the world of My Little Pony. According to him, Danceburst is Sunburst's brother, and he's traveled to him multiple times. On these travels, he's an upstanding citizen and does brotherly things with Sunburst. But as with most illusions, he keeps the details of these travels vague, so he can keep believing in his fantasy. He also actually believes that he is an actual pony. He refers to himself and others as ponies, and also calls their hands and feet hoofs. He's also a heavy advocate for Zuf, which is how he justifies his love for these ponies. But it gets even worse, where he goes as far as to say that children are capable consenters. He mainly actually got into the spotlight when a user called Tibbles made this post.
Hey, I wanted to formally announce, I don't accept in my space. Hate them. I would have my ass handed to me in the community guidelines if I said everything I think about them. In no uncertain terms, perish.
At this point, most people would simply respect her wishes and move on. But instead, Dan Spurs decided to post a video about it. The now private video titled Dan Spurs Debunks the Immorality of is over 25 minutes in length and goes over the disgusting reasons why Dan Spurs thinks that is justified. And the thumbnail of the video was a dog licking peanut butter off of a pony character, and it just clearly showed just one sign of how deranged Dan Spurs was at this point. But the contents of the video were even worse. He categorizes this video into two parts: why Zuf is not morally wrong and why Zuf should be legal. Starting with the first part, this is what he had to say.
Why is that any different than eating an animal? I'm not against people eating animals. The anti-zoo reply that we have to eat animals for nutrition, and even if we didn't, vegan stuff would be more expensive. But what if this weren't true? Here's my main claim. Even if all humans had readily available 100% nutritious bland tofu, it wouldn't be wrong or immoral for a human to hunt and kill an ostrich, either because they like the taste of its meat or because they enjoy the thrill of the hunt.
It's clear that Dan Spurs put extensive effort into this video and presented himself as a philosopher trying to explain a complex argument, but all the information he presents in the video is just extremely horrifying and warped. A few minutes later in the video, he tries to prove that a human's pleasure is more important than an animal's bodily autonomy and mental well-being. He goes as far as to say it's an insult to God not to engage with animals, because in the hierarchy of beings, humans are above other animals and should be able to enforce their will upon them. According to him, emotional damage is not based on morality, so violating an animal causes less harm than killing it. And since killing animals is perfectly okay, violating animals is morally right.
Killing an animal for its taste is a bigger harm to the animal than raping it for pleasure would be. Some say that non-mutilative rape would somehow traumatize an animal so much that it would be worse than killing them. Well, we know this isn't true, because animals who are raped don't become
He takes this one step further when he explains why placing an animal's will above a human's will debases God's vision of humans as the natural rulers of Earth.
God made a natural hierarchy of all living things: bacteria, plants, invertebrates, non-human mammals, humans, angels, and God. To place an animal's will before a human's will in any moral consideration is to debase God's vision of humans as the natural rulers of Earth.
Once he uploaded the video, he was quickly met with a lot of backlash, especially for his horrifying views regarding the but he always used some random argument to deal with any criticism, like this one. But it gets even worse. I already stated earlier that he refers to himself as a pony, and it unfortunately doesn't stop there. He also refers to women as mares, which is an adult female horse. And most disturbing of all, he refers to children as foals, which is a young horse. And in this Twitter post from July 2024, he acts like the ponies are real people and says some disturbing things.
My condolences to the husband. You gotta keep your mares in check. Stallions. Technically no husband. Missy along with my other cuties are from the king himself. He does like to be tied down to one, it seems. Would you like to see all my sweet babies? As Liam's royal inspector, I demand you present these cute foals to me for an official inspection.
And the replies just get even worse. When someone simply typed
no,
Dan Spurs responded with,
what kind of reply is that? Did you type it with one hand? I don't understand why you think you can do anything about my foal. Equestria doesn't have the same draconian age of consent laws in this dimension's human world. You'd know if you'd portaled there like I have.
But his disgusting activities don't stop there. On July 25th, 2024, he defended MAPS, otherwise known as minor attracted people.
These people say that the minor was grouped into doing what? Being platonic friends? This buzzword's used so often, it loses its meaning. Gets watered down to acted somewhat creepily, like gaslighting, being watered down into disagreeing, lying to me.
And he did make another huge post defending a person who took advantage of minors. Sawtooth was a self-proclaimed MAP and had taken advantage of a 14-year-old, which led to psychological trauma for the girl.
Let's look at this post that you sent. In her supposed expose of Sawtooth waves, she said that she was the one who told Sawtooth that she had a crush on them. Why? Why would you do this and then make an entire spiel about him being a predator when you really told him that you had a crush on them?
But there's still more. Worst of all, the infamous brony went on to take advantage of a year-old himself. This was actually kept under wraps, and all that is known is that it happened on a Discord server. He managed to get the girl to agree to come over to his place without her parents' knowledge. Luckily though, he was caught before the meet could happen, but the current state of the girl is now not known. Now this next case gets even worse. Unlike the endorse, who wasn't popular at all, Mando Pony was famous in the community before his crimes even came to light. Mando Pony, otherwise known as Andrew Stein, was a rock musician who made many songs and got a decent amount of views. His songs ranged from Five Nights at Freddy's to songs for gamers, along with My Little Pony. He started experimenting with chiptune music for the show back in 2011, with chiptune being a type of music that has the same vibe as old video games. It began with him restyling the main theme song before going on to more original tunes. And he would actually hit his peak with Five Nights at Freddy's. And it's easy to assume that after a few unsuccessful years, he would just move on. But instead, he continued making videos and interacting with members of the My Little Pony fandom. Now at this point, he's a married man, and while he isn't hugely popular, he is loved a lot by his fans. But everything changed once an account named Exposing Andy Stein was created. Created in July 2020, this account started to post horrifying screenshots of Andy texting younger people. And it becomes even more disgusting when you realize that Andrew Stein is again married. Unfortunately, the account that had all of the information no longer exists, and I couldn't even find it with the Wayback Machine. But I was able to find the details of one particular victim who was aged. This victim was extremely important because she had proof that it was actually Andrew texting her and not someone impersonating him, primarily because she had exposed pictures of him.
I've been meaning to say, yeah, thank you for keeping all of this private. It is probably wrong of me to be attracted to you, but I can't help it. Just as long as it's kept quiet, and as long as you're comfortable, is that okay? And it won't progress beyond just flirts and lewd moments, lol. Yeah, it's really no issue for me. I respect your privacy like you'd respect mine.
Now once this case came forward, many other women in the community also posted disturbing screenshots of their interactions with Andrew. Just to give you an idea of how horrible this guy is, one of the victims was as young as years old when she was preyed on by him. She was also homeless at the time, making it even worse.
This was the snapshot that Andrew Stein gave me, and the account he used to send explicit pictures. I was homeless, scared, and lost. And you took advantage of that, of you being my idol, telling me not to tell anyone.
Now while the screenshots themselves aren't enough to prove her story, the Twitter account has a lot of tweets of her worshipping Andrew. And it's clear that this wasn't one-sided, since he liked one of her posts too. But unfortunately, he deleted all the proof that the girl had.
This was the only thing saved in the DM so far. Everything else was deleted.
In another incident, he flirted with a year-old and even drew explicit pictures of her.
He kept sending me pics and stuff, and his explicit art. I eventually told him to stop sending it to me, as I felt really uncomfortable, and you know, it's not really my thing. But that's not all he would send. Oh, also explicit drawings that followed my smut scene.
But it gets even worse, as the account made another post explaining exactly what drawings were being talked about.
Some of Andy's art, 3 of them including the 15-year-old victim. The last image includes him, the girl, and Nathan Sharp as fairies on stage, with Nate daring the girl to kiss him. And no, Nate did not consent to this drawing.
To give you some context, Nathan Sharp is another singer in the gamer music scene. He and Andrew worked together on a couple of songs, and apparently that gave Andrew the right to draw Nate however he wanted. It's clear as day that Andrew Stein was using his position as a somewhat famous music creator on YouTube to take advantage of these younger girls. But while all of this was coming to light, Andrew was already planning a way to get out of this predicament. He suddenly made a comment about his mental health and then silently closed all of his accounts. He would also go as far as disabling comments.
After speaking with my therapist, psychiatrist, and more, I'm stepping away from social media and any spotlight. I am not well. I am seeking help. My family and friends are supporting me until I'm healthy. I wish you all peace and joy. Thank you.
And he would actually hold the silence for a year, but finally in 2021 he would break it with a statement of himself and his legal team.
When claims that I had a criminal relationship with some of my fans were made last year, they were thoroughly investigated by the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force in coordination with the LAPD. They did so for many months and independently concluded that no crimes had ever taken place. No taking advantage of, no no relations with any minor whatsoever.
To quickly summarize what he actually says in this huge letter, he claims that everything was baseless and that these rumors have ruined his life. He does say that some of his interactions with fans may have been insensitive and too personal, but he himself closes this chapter by saying he will continue his hiatus and move on with his life. So, despite the huge amount of evidence, it's confirmed that Andrew didn't face any consequences for his actions. But even this action is pale in comparison when it comes to the brony who decided to attack a whole building. It's April 15, 2021. 19-year-old Brandon Scott Hall, a former FedEx employee, enters a company building with a rifle, and just a few minutes later he would pass away inside that building. But to understand how he got there, we first need to look at Brandon's life leading up to this moment, especially considering the fact that this wasn't even the first time that he was publicly problematic, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Everything started going downhill when Brandon's father took his own life in 2004. At the time, Brandon wasn't even 3 years old, and growing up without a father meant that he had a lot of behavioral issues, and they became prominent around the 4th grade, which led to him going to behavioral therapy sessions for them. Now, in these sessions, he was diagnosed with a disruptive behavior disorder and anxiety disorder at the age of 10, and he was diagnosed with autism just a few years later in 2015. Eventually, his behavior deteriorated to a point where police had to be called to the home on at least 2 occasions. He couldn't even attend school and graduate, but that was the least of his worries, because in 2013, at the age of 11, Brandon was actually arrested for attacking his own mother and slightly injuring her. But considering his young age and troubled background, he was only sentenced to probation and counseling. But even that didn't help Brandon deal with the darkness in his mind. In March 2020, Brandon's mother contacted the local authorities and warned them about her son's intent to pass away by a cop and his purchase of a shotgun the day before. Police quickly responded to the home and took him to the hospital, and while being placed in handcuffs, Brandon told the officers to turn off his computer since he didn't want anyone to see what was on it. Now, luckily, an officer who had gone upstairs to seize the shotgun observed what he identified as white supremacist websites on Brandon's computer. This, combined with the severity of the incident, caused Brandon to be placed in an immediate detention mental health temporary hold by the Indianapolis Police Department, but he was actually released less than 2 hours later. Now, just a month later, in April 2020, the FBI questioned Brandon about the websites, but unfortunately the investigation was later closed due to insufficient evidence of any criminal violation or a racially motivated extremist ideology. This meant that Brandon was a free man even after all of this. He could do whatever he wanted. Now, his original plan to pass away by a cop wasn't possible anymore, considering that the police never returned his actual gun. But that's when he had another idea. In July and September, Brandon purchased 2 rifles legally from a licensed gun store. Now, the important thing to notice that under Indiana's red flag law, Brandon could have been prevented from making firearm purchases for at least 6 months after his temporary mental health detainment, if a hearing had been scheduled with the judge 14 days after they took away his gun. However, Marion County prosecutors decided not to schedule such a hearing, since they believed that the authorities had already achieved the law's objective. After all, like I mentioned earlier, Brandon never got his shotgun back. Prosecutor Ryan Mears also said that if his officer had proceeded with the hearing and lost, considering that Brandon had been treated by medical professionals but not prescribed any medication, they would have been forced to return the gun to him. And at the time, they believed that as long as Brandon didn't have a weapon, he couldn't hurt anyone. But they'd find out just how wrong they were just a few days later. This brings us back to the start of this case, April 15th, 2021. 19-year-old Brandon is outside the FedEx building with 2 rifles he'd purchased. Brandon actually worked at this FedEx facility from August to October 2020, before being terminated for being absent too often. This meant that he knew the layout by heart. But before he could commit any mass unalivings, he used his Facebook account to make the last few posts of his life.
I hope that I can be with Applejack in the afterlife. My life has no meaning without her. If there's no afterlife and she isn't real, then my life never mattered anyways.
Now, Applejack is again one of the fictional characters in the My Little Pony universe, and he made his last post dedicated to her. Although not clearly documented, it seems like his entire life revolved around this character. From there, he arrived at the facility during a shift change, spoke to security, and then went back to his vehicle. He checked his guns, made sure that they had enough ammo, and braced himself. Soon after, Brandon exited his vehicle and began firing at employees in the parking lot. He then proceeded to the facility facility's entrance where he resumed attacking. Brandon then tried to progress further into the building, but he was actually blocked by a full-height turnstile gate. So he instead fired shots at employees on the other side of the turnstile before exiting the building again. Then in the parking lot, he repeated history. Now a different employee actually fired at Brandon with his own handgun, but missed. And eventually Brandon was satisfied enough and walked back into the building to end his own life there. The attack lasted less than 4 minutes, but the damage was already done. There were 9 fatalities in the attack, including Brandon. In the end, the FBI concluded that the attack was an act of taking his own life and murdering people, intended to demonstrate his masculinity and capability while fulfilling a final desire to experience taking the lives of others. Now that leaves us with one major question though. Why was he talking about Applejack right before the attack? After the incident, the authorities found his laptop, which contained the answer to this question.
According to the Wall Street Journal, which cited internal memos circulated by Facebook in the wake of the attack, the gunman primarily used his Facebook accounts to discuss his love for My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, a children's cartoon series featuring magical ponies. Adult fans of the show are often referred to as bronies. The gunman posted about his love of a tawny pony named Applejack, one of the main characters of the franchise, less than an hour before the rampage. The gunman also reportedly had a history of posting far-right content, such as a meme suggesting Jesus had been reincarnated as an Austrian painter.
So Brandon was a big part of the brony community, which explains his love for Applejack. And the community also gave him an environment where he could post far-right content, which we saw in the very first case. All in all, Brandon had a bad start with losing his dad at a young age, but being part of the brony fandom most likely made things worse. But even this can't compare to the next case on our list, which is probably the most horrifying one. Since the rise of My Little Pony and animation content as a whole, YouTube has become home to a number of channels that discuss and criticize this very content. One such channel was made by Zach, better known as Toon Critic Y2K. He created this channel on May 3rd, 2012, and he could have not made it at a better time, since this was when the brony community went from being a niche 4chan subculture to a full-blown fandom. However, while we do know that Zach got extremely popular at one point, all of his YouTube content has been wiped off the face of the internet. Not much information is available on the Internet Archive either. However, from the few archives that do exist, we know that in 2014 he'd garnered over 3,000 subscribers, and in 2015 he was making $170 per written review or vlog on Patreon. We also know that by 2017, just 3 years later, he had 17,000 subscribers, but often struggled to break 1,000 views on a video. Now it's clear that Jack didn't achieve the same level of success as other creators, and couldn't have been making his primary income from his YouTube channel. However, he was still extremely well connected with other brony creators, and was part of a big Skype group called the Rift Cafe, which describes itself as a collaborative storyline made up by the brony analysis community.
The Rift Cafe is a meeting place beyond any other realm, where creatures from all walks of life can come to have a drink or relax for a while. Residing within the Rift, this cafe had its humble beginnings as a brony Skype group, dubbed the Commentary Collective, later renamed the Rift Cafe, and over time evolved into a shared lore between multiple YouTube channels.
And we get some more details about Toon Critic from his page on the Rift Cafe wiki, such as illustrations of his brony character and backstory behind it. Toon Critic Y2K is a red Pegasus pony. He's often referred to as an edgelord as a result of his famous red and black color scheme. After doing battle with his alter ego Cartoon Z, Toon's body was forced to regenerate. He sports a leather jacket, goggles, and a goatee. Now apparently his alter ego Cartoon Z took over his channel from time to time to terrorize others in the brony analysis community. And because of this he would gain horse fame, which is the brony equivalent of being a celebrity. And this meant he would take part in popular group projects such as a series called TF2 Analysis. Now this series was a strange crossover in which various creators from the community interacted with each other in the world of the Valve game Team Fortress 2, but every character is still a pony. It has an ongoing story and lore, and the first episode has over 500,000 views. But beneath the exterior of a somewhat famous brony YouTuber, Zach's behavior was becoming erratic. After all, his fame came from trying to psychologically break his fellow creators and friends. But things would take a turn for the worse as allegations came out about him behaving inappropriately at cons. In a video uploaded on his channel, Viva, another brony YouTuber, discusses the major allegations. But these are just some of the few allegations that have come to light, and multiple people in the comments have come forward as well.
My friend was groped by him at a con too. This whole thing is fucked up, Jesus Christ. It's fucked up beyond belief, especially how long he's been able to essentially get away with it.
But the worst thing about this whole situation is, most people don't even remember the touching inappropriately allegations, because ultimately it was nothing compared to the heinous nature of Zach's other misdeeds. In 2018, over 500 screenshots surfaced, which showed Zach inappropriately texting a girl. These texts started when the girl was barely while Zach at the same time was already 24 years old, a full decade older. As they get closer, he began doing roleplays with her, and in one of these sessions he said,
"It's just so exciting knowing you're barely legal."
Soon after, he tried to take a step further than just roleplaying as each other's characters.
Well, here's the thing, I'm not asking to be in a relationship with you. When I said go further, I mean a step further than just RPs and teasing, because you are too young to start a relationship. However, I want to explore those other kinds of feelings, more so on the romantic side. Do you get what I'm saying? I want you to know this is all okay, and I want to help you understand all this, but only if you want to go a little further.
He's completely aware of the 10-year difference, but at the same time just doesn't stop interacting inappropriately with this girl and even develops feelings.
Is it weird that I'm attracted to you? Like in what way, if I may ask? Okay, like attracted in the mental and emotional sense. Hey, I'm flattered, really. It's just that for one thing, the 10-year difference, man. XD, I think you're a really great friend. Yeah, a 10-year difference. XD.
But he doesn't stop at texts, going as far as trying to meet with her in real life.
Also, a random little thing I realized, if you're serious about what we can get away with, if I was ever able to meet you in real life, via a con or any other visit, you'd technically take my first kiss in that regard. Oh, how so? Well, I do remember you saying that you wanted to do something like that some time ago, if that's ever possible for me to go to a con, which I'm praying for at this point, XD, and me being completely alright with it, don't think I'd forget that kind of stuff. Fair enough, I think it'd be pretty interesting having you all to myself in a hotel room. I must admit that you're making me morbidly curious about what you would do if that area were to come up. Do you actually want to know? Imagine the roleplays we've done.
But he didn't just stop at pursuing a relationship with her. He even tried to obtain explicit photos.
Would you ever consider modeling? Funny enough, you're not the first person who said that to me. XD, I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable before. You didn't, don't worry man. I didn't feel uncomfortable at any point. What makes you say that? About the curiosity of modeling and underwear. Oh, don't worry. I know you didn't have any ill intent. I trust you like that. Unless you did have actual ill intent. Of course not. I think it would be interesting to see you try that. Life's all about taking chances. You'd have nothing to lose. You already have the curves.
The conversation then proceeds to talk about her physical features, and you can probably understand what was said. At this point, it's important to get some background information about the girl. While we don't know her identity, it's clear that she suffers from severe social anxiety and depression. Zach was essentially her only friend, since she couldn't hold any conversations in person. And Zach knows all of this, yet he still continues to push her into relationships and flirty conversations. But thankfully, after letting it go on for 13 months, in December of 2017, he seemingly came to his senses.
Oh, so you were uncomfortable with what we've been doing? Obviously not. I just want to take a break from it. Something didn't feel quite right. I'm curious what you mean by that, but if you don't want to tell me, I won't pry. Up until recently, I thought this was just for fun, but then I realized I'm doing this with a 15-year-old. I gave one of my friends flag for doing this exact same thing.
Now eventually the chats did get leaked, and Zach got the backlash from it from other creators. They put him in a video call and confronted him about it. However, he makes very little attempt to defend his actions, and even more disturbingly, he claims to have done worse things than just that.
We know that we have a lot of solid evidence and concrete proof that you are, at least what you have done, is people. You have asked for photos of her in nothing but a leather jacket and panties. You have sent her pictures of your only covered in boxes. You've sent her porn. You've done a lot of bad things, Zach.
There have been times where I admit I have done things that are probably worse than this.
And yes, he admits that this wasn't even the first time he had taken advantage of a younger person before. But that ended with the police and had bad consequences. Considering the severity of his actions, there was no way the others could allow Zach to stay in the community. However, considering he'd been a long-time member, his fellow creators gave him 24 hours to turn himself in and leave the community on his own.
At this point, we're just repeating ourselves, but you need to face the music, all right?
We've told you everything we're going to tell you, essentially. It's up to you now, really. You have 24 hours. You can go to the police, or you can do whatever the hell you want. Quite frankly, I don't care.
They would go on to report Zach, but unfortunately no legal consequences came out of this incident. And worst of all, none of this would really bother Zach, at least until he realized it took all of his horse fame away. Zach wasn't really good at his job, and his career depended on his relationship with the other creators and popularity in the community. And even the group call would get leaked on the 26th of February and make headlines on Horse News, which would only make the situation worse for him, as more screenshots were leaked of him defending his behavior.
I will say this. These screen caps, if you've seen them, are not fake. I believe this whole entire story is being twisted in a way to make me look bad. Age of consent laws in the Philippines are 12, from what I was told.
He says that his actions were justified because he's got Filipino boy swagger, despite the fact that his Skype profile blatantly says that he's in Illinois, where the age of consent is 17. After the call was leaked, yet another victim by the name of Abby came out with her own screenshots. This victim first met Zach when he claimed that he wanted to help her out with her YouTube channel, and slowly their conversation progressed from there.
I've been told that my eyes tend to sparkle when I'm happy too. Never would have imagined. Well, you're pretty. Thank you, that's really nice. It's nice to be complimented once in a while. High school isn't exactly the most positive place in Equestria. Yeah, we all know how that feels. I don't want you to think I'm coming on to you or anything.
They would also roleplay, and once again he would push the conversation in an inappropriate direction.
I'll give you a hint. Charismatic, handsome, energetic. And edgy, don't forget edgy. Maybe a little sex.
Now coming back to the call, many people actually didn't agree with how it was handled, mainly that it was too respectful and soft for someone like Toon. Many of the community members made videos critiquing the people confronting Zach. Of these, one of the original creators who went against Zach made a video. In the video, Josh, the one who was speaking softly to Zach, explained the events from behind the scenes. He would further explain his reasons for keeping the story silent till further steps could be taken.
Firstly, Sally did not want to have her name forever linked to this scandal, especially at her age. Secondly, the wiser thing to do would be to hold off on reveals until we had statements prepared so there wouldn't be any misinformation spread.
Dr. Wolf, another creator, posted a video being angry at Josh for talking about forgiveness to Toons. In the same video, Josh explains that this was all a big misunderstanding.
There was a dramatic failure to communicate about what we meant when we said forgiveness, and we take full responsibility for it. Dr. Wolf and I are Christian. Different denominations, but still Christians, and as such, we failed to recognize a huge disconnect between our secular and non-secular audiences, and that's not your fault, it's ours. The word forgiveness for most Christians holds a drastically different meaning than for most secular audiences.
Now, despite all of the horrific things, there was a creator called Performance Major who took the side of Zach, but that led to him actually confessing his own explicit behavior.
I roleplay with just about anyone who's willing, and sometimes, if the minors mature enough, I'll roleplay with them too.
He would also say he's only breaking the law because he's above 18, and she's just as guilty. However, after facing severe criticism, he and his opinions disappeared off the face of the internet. Now, despite all of this, no legal action was taken against Zach, primarily because there was no physical contact between him and the girl he took advantage of. This meant that Zach had permission to come back under different usernames. Back in 2019, these included abreeze72 and Mucha Lucha. He used a second name to get into the Pokemon community, which is also full of young people who can be targets for Zach. The abreeze account would also stream regularly on Twitch, where you can clearly make out that it's Toons. Now, it would be deactivated after it was called out by YouTube creators, but there's still more to the story. His most recent attempt was in July 2024 via a Discord account called Radioactive Mud.
Hi, it's me, Vinny. I was one of his friends and victims over the past year or so, and I think it's time I make a proper post to further call him out. Let me reintroduce you to Zach, aka Toon Critic YT.
Yes, he continued his behavior, with more victims coming out to talk about him.
I too was a victim of Golden Nova, aka Toon Critic Y2K. He tried to make a move on me back in March, and I knew for a fact that he was sus. He has broke multiple boundaries with a lot of people that I've known, and f***ed over friendships between friend groups.
Now he has gone back into hiding since, and his current status is unknown. But one thing is for sure, most likely until he's locked away or his access to the internet is taken away, Toon Critic Y2K is out there, and probably trying to find more victims to take advantage of.